The manga begins with the protagonist, who we will call Ed, standing in front of door number 001, the door that leads to the first other world he was exiled to in the past. 100 years have passed since then, and Ed has traveled to so many isekai, but only 10 years have gone by in this particular world, and the otherworld banished traveler finally puts in the key and opens it, fully believing that a peaceful place is waiting for his return. Going back in a few hours, we can see Ed getting told by his companion, "You don't have to come tomorrow," confusing the adventurer as he struggles to reply in front of his other comrades. Eventually, he understands what it is they're trying to imply, only to conclude that tomorrow will be his day off, which infuriates the warrior-looking man as he emphasizes that they have no need of him anymore. And it is there the hero party's decision to banish Ed from their group, after talking about it many times without the person in question. Of course, Ed feels shocked by this sudden decision, which turns out to be a general agreement between his companions, so he tries to knock some sympathy on them by reminding the adventurers about their promise to defeat the Demon King together. Ed then begs the hero, hoping this is just some kind of prank, only to get face to face with the truth that all of them are serious. Even so, the hero is thankful to Ed, whose talent is worthy for him to invite in the past, and who has actually helped them for these past few months. But he still slams the table in rage while mentioning the guy's deteriorating performance. It turns out that Ed is taking the easy way on his tasks and not engaging in self-training anymore, causing him to get left behind by other members in terms of battle prowess. Given they're the hero party after all. Still, after a long time of enduring and believing that Ed's motivation and hard work will return, a final decision has been made, and the banished adventurer can't do anything about it now but accept the harsh reality that, at this moment, he is exiled from the hero's party. But while all are speechless as it is a bitter decision they make, a notification panel appears, informing Ed, who is strangely grinning, that he successfully meets all the conditions for his most awaited return 10 minutes from now. The adventurer yells in extreme happiness, and even gets up from his seat without an inch of depression, unlike before, which leads the hero party to think that their now former teammate is getting mentally insane because of the banishment. Ed disagrees with that, though, and is in all smiles while informing them that his wish has finally come true. So he offers them something as a parting gift by using a skill known as dimensional storage, which shocks the hero and the witch as they watch the guy pulling a bunch of books and ultimately presents it to them as instruction manuals. However, the sorceress is more interested in the dimensional skill rather than those papers, to the point that she's already panting in excitement while talking about it. So Ed jumps away from her grasp and tells the four to use the manuals as references to acquire their desired growth, as they are lists of efficient training methods. Therefore, the girl who seems to be their priestess asks about an unfamiliar skill she ought to learn according to the book. So Ed tells her that it's something the healer will discover as she grows older, and even gives advice on what parts to read to achieve it. The warrior, on the other hand, is just bewildered about the advanced and highly detailed map with traps and hidden passages recorded, and asks Ed where in the world he gets this convenient artifact. Of course, the exiled adventurer will keep the details a secret, as he's not part of their party after all. But maybe that will change when the hero apologizes out of the blue and even bows his head to beg for forgiveness for not noticing Ed's hard work. After that, the priestess follows and says sorry to Ed for trying to get rid of him from the party, and the same goes for the warrior who feels pathetic regarding what they did. Ed is troubled, however, and says he just wants to be useful before leaving the party, so the witch declares that they're taking back their decision to expel him, which even their leader, the hero, agrees, and has no objections whatsoever. Hearing his invitation to return elates Ed for a moment, but then apologizes to them with a face that screams he doesn't want to go back anymore. His former companions are absolutely dumbfounded, and the hero is apologetic for making such a shameless demand. But Ed feels no bitterness and doesn't harbor any grudge, but instead hopes that his friends will defeat the Demon King. Without even saying goodbye, Ed runs away from his ex-teammates and sprints along the city, passing by the townsfolk with an excited smile while listening to the 10-second countdown for his return. 5, 4, 3, 2, and Ed leaps above roofs to reach a bell tower and make it a place fitting for his most awaited return as the countdown ends, and the world transmigration begins in a magical and otherworldly process, which doesn't take too long and ultimately finishes when Ed's body gets teleported in a realm which for him is too nostalgic, because too long has passed since the banished adventurer's last visit. In this heavenly domain of pure white, where a table with 2 chairs and numerous yet continuous doors are lined up. It is revealed that Ed has spent 1 whole year in the previous world, exhausting him at the very core as he then takes a seat after stretching. His demeanor will turn 180 degrees, however, as Ed glares at someone and orders that mysterious being to take him home like they promised, even though there's nothing in front of him except a magical crystal ball. Though, as expected, the entity he refers to as a god is not saying anything in reply. Hence, Ed reminisces a bit on his first day of being summoned into this realm, where his ignorant self sees a pure white-colored book conspicuously lying on the table. That time, there is only 1 door, so as oblivious as he is, Ed reads the not-so-large tome, albeit reluctantly, and learns his new mission: become a companion of the hero in another world and work with him together for more than half a year, then get himself exiled from their party, allowing Ed to return to this mysterious realm. The guy is not pleased, however, and it seems like his intelligence is not enough to understand all parts, although it's clear that a door can only be opened once, and a new one will just appear after that. With that in mind, the current state of things is truly commendable, so there's no stopping Ed from proudly presenting the doors he has conquered, which means that this guy is successful in visiting 100 worlds and does his mission of being exiled within 100 years. Thus, Ed can't forgive the callous god for not setting up a celebratory mood, even though he has finally completed the assigned mission. Ed glares once more toward the empty seat, but the god replies nothing to his complaints, as usual, making him dejected as he lets out a sigh and looks at his reflection on the floor. Due to that, Ed contemplates his disability of getting old, as it turns out that no matter what changes his body undergoes in the other worlds, all of those will reset when he returns to this realm known as the White World, where time doesn't flow. Ed then gets up, thinking about how he is a permanent 20-something-year-old, despite overcoming 100 years of adventure, leading him to realize that he'll be an old man upon finally getting back home, and no one will care about him anymore, including his friends and beloved mother, whose faces and memories can only be vaguely remembered by the banished adventurer now. Faced with a harsh reality, Ed lets out a dry laugh, resigned to all challenges as he begs the god to fulfill his promise and take him home. To the adventurer's surprise, the crystal ball emits a dazzling light, which for Ed feels too familiar as the phenomenon turns out to be a regular event every time the adventurer gets expelled from another world, the granting of exiled skills. Some great examples of this will be the abilities he has shown to his previous adventuring party, such as the dimensional storage known as Wanderer's Treasury, the map recording ability called the Travel Footprints, and other exiled skills like the Glasses of 7 Lights and Half-Fledged Counterfeiter. Thanks to them, Ed has successfully joined numerous hero parties, so he will once again grab the achievement reward regardless of whether it will be the last one the god will give. Without further ado, Ed grasps the crystal ball, allowing magical waves to appear, and sends information to the guy's brain, making the adventurer go seriously with how amazing the new exiled skill is. Turns out, it is a one-time use ability that, for Ed, is too precious to use until the last minute. The skill isn't announced yet, however, but the adventurer already notices something weird happening not far from where he is, causing him to realize that the sudden fluctuations may be caused by a new door appearing. Still, the mystery remains as nothing pops up in the opposite direction ever since, because an additional door always materializes next to the one that has been conquered. After running, Ed reaches the mystery door number 000 and smiles upon assuming that it will lead him to his original world, granting his ultimate wish after all these years. Thus, Ed excitedly opens the doorknob until he remembers about the time difference and realizes that 100 years have gone by there, and what awaits him might be a nightmare where everyone he knows is deceased. Ed yells his disagreement with this undesirable reward after the exhausting labor he blindly goes through without even knowing the purpose and meaning of the mission. Eventually, the adventurer blows his fuse and threatens the god that he'll use his newly acquired skill if the divine being doesn't make up for all his sufferings, because the situation can't be considered a reward at all. In spite of that, no one replies a word, and the god drops another pure white book instead, which resembles the first one that was on the table earlier. Ed reads the tome and learns that the digits under the number plates represent the time that had passed in a particular world when he left it. So Ed immediately takes a look at door 000 and finds out that there's no minute or even a second that has gone by, which means that he can go back without worries. Excited, Ed opens the door only to discover that the doorknob isn't budging at all, and another tome drops straight on his head, hitting the poor adventurer. Even how pathetic that is. Ed flips through the book and sees a key with a note saying it's a commemoration service for his total expulsion, making the banished adventurer so happy that he bites his lips in rage and swears foul words. Putting that aside, Ed reads the manual and learns that the key can open the door to a world he has visited in the past, and all that's left is to revisit it, allowing him to come back to his hometown. Then, the key will crumble into pieces, and when all conditions are met, door number 000 will open. A great and straightforward deal that Ed clearly hates, as it is also troublesome to stop by another place for his grand return to happen. Upon thinking about it, however, the adventurer realizes that he doesn't need to do the usual thing of joining a hero party and get himself exiled because he can just visit shortly and return afterward. In short, it's an easy win for Ed, who is now frolicking in excitement while wandering through the hall and thinking about what to choose. Eventually, the guy stumbles upon a nostalgic door number 001, where the first world he transferred to is located. As a result, Ed remembers how hard his experiences are, mainly because the situation and mission are all new to him, not to mention that he does not yet have any skills to join the hero's party. However, thanks to the exiled skill, Accidental Flag Bearer, the transmigrator's fate and the hero intertwine, and the rest is history. His inferior skill problems still linger, though, making Ed desperate not to get kicked out until the time limit, so he searches for things to do to contribute, like arranging lodgings, carrying pieces of luggage, and so on. Therefore, it's a mystery for Ed what his former companions think of him as a general chores boy, which also triggers the banished adventurer to wonder what happens to those three after they expel him. Ed then sees that 10 years have passed in that world since then, and assumes it's more than enough time for the team to defeat the Demon King, making it a peaceful place to live. With that said, Ed decides to do his little sightseeing trip in that world, and immediately puts in the key, while having a moment of reminiscing about his pleasing, harsh, and definitely bittersweet experiences. Without any shred of bitterness, Ed opens the door and covers his eyes to defend against the blinding light, blurting out the words, "I've missed you," before stepping into the place where his otherworld journey began. In the grassy fields, the banished adventurer successfully teleports in the nostalgic scenery, wondering if it's really the first world he migrated into 100 years ago. For safety purposes, Ed then hides the key in his pocket, even though he can just use the dimensional storage and have more security than that piece of cloth. Wow, big brain. After all, this guy might need it later, and eventually searches for a town in his memories, hoping that there aren't monsters nearby due to the apparent defeat of the Demon King. Unfortunately, his assumptions are too early this time, and might always have been, as a lurking beast slowly reveals its presence, and makes this adventurer a lump of confused atoms because it instantly attacks without a single warning whatsoever, given that it's an unintelligent creature after all. Fortunately, Ed evades the finishing blow before it's too late, and he becomes cat food, although for snakes, because what's lying right in front of him is an enormous evolved arbok in its final unannounced form. It doesn't seem to be a problem though, as Ed just activates his Wanderer's treasury to pull a sword out of that dimensional storage, and is gung-ho in fighting after knowing that his exiled skills can be used perfectly, unlike when he was still an idiot newbie. Of course, the current situation is different, and Ed is now a full-fledged swords brain as he greets the snake's attack head-on, with no dodging or evasion, and just uses the invincible impregnable wall skill to defend against the cobra's fangs that fail to reach Ed's skin. The banished adventurer's skincare seems so effective in a completely different sense, because it destroys the cobra's canine teeth in one go, and forces it to disengage before firing a magic-dissolving liquid from its wide-open mouth. As usual, Ed is entirely uninterested, and just lets the snake shoot its life-ending breath given that he has another cheating ability of magic absorption to test against the pitiful monster once again. Alive and kicking, Ed leaps above the gigantic cobra to, you've guessed it, make one final experiment of his exiled skills. Slash, dash, and boom. The next you see the monster is when it splits into two, with both of those parts having utterly zero signs of life, except that it still manages to fall apart along with the adventurer's landing. Yeah, as if those count, Ed wins 100%, and you can't stop him from having an isekai slow life this time around. Now that the battle is finished, Ed puts the sword in the Wanderer's treasury, unlike what he did in the key, and continues the journey toward the first otherworld town since not so long ago. This time, the banished adventurer doesn't need to be exiled, so he can finally live how he wants with absolutely no holds barred, especially after discovering that dimensional storage has a heap of gold and silver coins in stock. Therefore, there's no stopping this guy from daydreaming about a shopping-filled life and ultimately becoming a businessman selling steamed buns and hero manju buns that will definitely make him a multimillionaire. Or at least that's what he hopes. However, what comes after is a whole 180-degree turn in his mood, because Ed just spots a shocking scene in the far distance, forcing him to sprint impatiently to confirm what that really is. Rent-free manju business location? Unfortunately, that's not the case. After all, in front of the banished adventurer lies a town in ruins with no human or living being sightings whatsoever. Assuming that the demon lord has been defeated, there's only one thing to conclude when faced with this scenery, which makes Ed wonder if humans have waged war on one another after reigning as victors in the conflict against other races. He wanders around the ruined town in search of clues while contemplating the ridiculous operations of the war-freaked humans, ultimately concluding that the situation is no renovation or anything of the sort. "So, what in the world is going on here?" said Ed, except the word he used was something that would likely get me in trouble. Putting that aside, the returnee stumbles into an old man scavenging for some valuables and tells Ed, "There's nothing left around here, okay?" Insert some tsundere tone, and he probably says that as a scavenger pro. Of course, the adventurer has no accurate idea what the old man is talking about, but the latter, on the other hand, is under the assumption that the kid is here because of some false information. Thus, he tosses a bag of coins to Ed, although it's evidently not what he wants, and proceeds to ask why this town is in a bad condition. The old man thinks this kid is some kind of a dum-dum, probably. It's just my assumption. But he still declares the shocking revelation. The Demon King's army wiped this city out in the middle of their advance 2 years ago. Ed is shocked upon hearing those words that he asks the stranger why the Demon Lord is still alive and kicking, only to receive a reply somewhere along the lines of, "Hey, it's been going on for a long time. Where primate ancient city do you come from not to know that?" Not the exact phrase, but the point is there. And Ed gets all of it except the insult. So he asks what has happened to the hero Alexis for all these to occur. The banished adventurer mentions the event 10 years ago where Alexis, who is also the prince, was on the verge of defeating the Demon King together with his hero party, only to learn from the old man that the guy he's talking about so passionately all this time is in a not-so-passionate relationship with his own grave 5 years ago, ever since Alexis gets eliminated fighting the Demon King's army. Ed is in disbelief because he still thinks that his former companion is a tough nut to crack. Well, sure, he is the hero after all, but the Arbok case and the state of this ruined city are not to be ignored because there are more than enough pieces of evidence to say that the old man's words are all real. As a glimmer of hope, Ed goes hysterical and asks the old stranger regarding news about the 2 more members of the hero party, but then learns that they're pretty much deceased, as there's no new information about them. One can't paint the depression on Ed's face as strength escapes from his body, and he can only take a seat mainly because of the demise of his ex-teammates, or due to the kid's shattered manju dreams. Either way, the old man bids his goodbye to the banished adventurer, and advises him to get moving too. But that's impossible for Ed right now, as he is too preoccupied with his thoughts, lamenting the terrible and saddening news about the departed hero party, wondering what in the world really happened after his banishment. He recalls the figures of those old friends, Alexis, Gonzo, and Tia, and comes to think that his leave may be the reason why this situation is happening. Apparently, it's too conceited of him to feel that way because he is just a mere luggage bearer of those 3, and the future will surely remain unchanged despite what his past decisions may be. The corpses will remain corpses, so there's absolutely nothing Ed can do but see the situation with his own eyes and confirm if they are really true. Therefore, the banished adventurer activates one of his exiled skills, the Akashic Compass, and searches for the location where Alexis spends his last few seconds. It doesn't take too long for the item to learn that Alexis has become a rock, or is underneath that large boulder, which also means he has departed on his way toward the Demon King's castle. Next, Ed orders the compass to find where Gonzo is, only to discover that the warrior is in the same place where the hero lies, and is undoubtedly in the process of decay. Darkness fills the atmosphere around Ed, and he starts to question what's the point of finding their remains when it's highly unlikely that he'll build a grave for them. What happens after is a real shocker, however, because finding Tia's corpse, according to the Akashic Compass, is not applicable. As I said, it's an absolute shocker even for Ed, who eventually gets up from his seat in surprise and looks carefully at the item, only to see nothing on the compass's little screen. Once again, and in a louder voice this time, Ed yells the question regarding the alive Tia's current location, and discovers that the girl is hiding in an enormous treehouse somewhere around the world. Well, good for you, banished boy. He doesn't waste time engaging in anxious second thoughts like some manga characters, especially Wimmy, if you watched that recap, and instantly leaps away from the place with all his might, using another exiled skill, the Hermes dash. Ed is becoming a superhuman, or a bulldozer more accurately, as he charges through the buildings like it's nothing, all while thinking about his former girl companion. Vroom, sprinting at a ridiculous speed. It's Tia surfacing in his mind, hoping she really is alive, and it's that gorgeous elf living rent-free in his brain again. Man, hurry up. Eventually, Ed reaches a wide pond full of otherworldly swans, but of course, Tia is all this guy can think about, especially that girl's smile when turning around and calling his name. And honestly, don't mind the text bubble interrupting the sight. Afterward, Ed uses Mirage Shift, a 1-hour duration ability to divert the attention of the monsters, allowing him to run freely toward the location without distractions whatsoever. 51 minutes remaining, and the adventurer climbs mountains with minimal effort, eventually diving onto the deep seas in the last 35 minutes, and ultimately making his way to various places without the risk of hungry beasts engaging in a battle and taking too much of his time when Ed could have used that to go to the lady elf he missed so much. Of course, what's happening right now is exactly that, until the countdown runs out and the effects of Mirage Shift wears off. Well, in the end, it doesn't pose much of a problem for Ed, who runs a marathon against some winged monsters. Meanwhile, in a dark kingdom not far from where the adventurer is, we can see what seems to be a high-ranking demon leading the monsters on their march toward an expedition to conquer another human town. This is a typical advance of the zombie-like trolls, devilish knights, or whatever they may be, so nothing could go wrong in this operation where they also have the upper hand because of the hero's absence. Hold your horses right there, demons. The likes of you can't stop a man who is eager to reunite with an elf beauty. Unfortunately, there's no time for the devils to evade the unstoppable hurricane of Ed's Hermes dash, an accidental reverse car to thwart their plans to eliminate humanity. Without even realizing it, Ed forms a cyclone in the area, which can only be seen if you're in outer space and, yes, other worlds have their own cosmic space. You just can't see it because you're always in a hunt for Nekomimi girls. Finally, Ed arrives in the deep parts of a particular forest full of gigantic trees, exotic plants, and sweats of the adventurer who is panting from all that running he did. However, Ed doesn't care about that right now, because he just arrived at the house where Tia resides, according to the stalker tool Akashic Compass. Unfortunately, it's at this moment that Ed knows you know the word, as this guy realizes that he doesn't bring any souvenirs for Miss Elf. The adventurer desperately searches through the dimensional storage to look for something acceptable as a gift, until he grabs 3 pieces of food known as orange fruit. This for a long-awaited reunion gift? Don't ask me. Regardless of our opinions, Ed decides to go with those sweet fruits because Tia apparently likes them, so he immediately heads toward the door and knocks, only to stop midway. Ed begins to overthink Tia's opinions when she finally sees him, and comes to think that the elf may not welcome him with a smile, given that he is, after all, an exiled member. Frustrated, Ed grits his teeth and stops himself from cowering in fear as he finally knocks on the girl's wooden door. The adventurer breathes deeply and inhales, exhales while waiting, which leads Ed to get zero response, causing him to panic and put his face closer to the door to yell, "Hello? Anyone inside?" Only to discover that the door isn't locked all this time, although he learns that in the hard way. Ed hurriedly apologizes for entering without permission, and he's ready to get scolded for acting like a trespasser. But the elf's voice sends all that nervousness away with just a single, "Who?" Finally, Miss Elf makes her whole appearance and not a mere memory. But don't you look somewhere besides Tia's face. Otaku. The team is ready to bonk our wooden sticks against the degenerates, targeting this pure elf waifu. Putting our policies aside, Tia still can't believe that Ed reunites with her after a few years, wondering if she's still dreaming and if all of these are not reality. The banished adventurer feels so shocked that he blurts out the elf's name, which leads Tia to confirm that the unannounced visitor is Ed all along, making her elated as she stares at her former companion. That same excitement is also evident on Ed's face, even though he's stuttering from saying hi while looking at Miss Elf, who, for him, doesn't change a bit according to his memory of 100 years ago. The person being discussed will interrupt his thoughts, however, because Tia leaps toward Ed to give him a warm embrace full of excitement and doesn't even give the guy an opportunity to evade. Moreover, Miss Elf is getting way too close, and it seems like she can't stop herself from saying Ed's name so many times now that I don't want to count it anymore. It's pointless anyway. Eventually, Ed blows his fuse and tells Tia to calm down, only to get his cheeks pinched by Miss Elf as she still can't believe that he's alive after all this time. Ed comments and calls it an exaggeration, but Tia, who's sitting nonchalantly atop the over 100-year-old young man, reveals that no one has heard of his name, no matter where she went, even though Ed should be famous as a former member of the Heroes Party. Therefore, the banished adventurer informs Tia that he worked in a different country with an altered name so as not to look bad by being treated as the exiled big words for a big liar who, in reality, returns to the white world after the banishment. Fortunately, Tia buys his lies and even shows a genuine smile that depicts how happy and relieving it is after seeing that Ed is safe. Then, she emphasizes the possibility of her falling, which he also thinks is true. So Ed puts the little girl down on the chair, allowing Tia to see orange fruits that are scattered on the floor. She's quite pleased to see the souvenirs, though, unlike my expectations at first, and Tia suddenly feels apologetic for not having a bath in her house. The relation between the gift and the shower remains a memory, until Miss Elf reveals that orange fruit is typically eaten after cutting and washing in the bath, which is also the norm, although Ed says that eating it normally won't make any difference. See, Tia is weirded out by what he said. Ed has his tongue sticking out, however, and he is raring to go and turn the fruits into sweet snacks to prove his point. Suddenly, Tia looks curious at Ed and calls him out of the blue to ask why his clothes are tattered, forcing the banished adventurer to reveal that he's traveling around the world to, quote, see an old lady I used to know. Wait, old lady? Whoever may that be. Tia chuckles when she hears that before looking down and smiling, while happily thinking about Ed's words. Miss Elf then informs her former companion that she will change clothes first, but all that does is awaken the inner perv of Ed, who imagines using his oh-so-powerful hands that Tia is in her pajamas all this time. Suddenly, the elf invites him to change clothes together, but thankfully, Ed still has his restraints activated, so there are no blurry panels this time around, or do the viewers want that? Sometime later, Ed finishes slicing orange fruits and serving them on the table, where he finds out that there are exactly 4 chairs, which is the exact number of their adventuring party in the past. The exiled adventurer decides to tour a little bit more and heads toward a room with 3 beds, enough to assume that it's reserved for the 3 men in the group. But while he's in the middle of peeking, Ed panics because Tia just arrived, albeit with a totally different appearance, as Miss Elf shyly presents her adventurer outfit while asking the guy's opinions, Loki wanting to receive some compliments. Oops, don't look at her thighs, or we might just have to blur them, or not. Ask the editor if you'll be spared from the foggy spectacle. Unfortunately, Ed's problem lies on a different path because he assumes that Tia puts those clothes on for additional protection against the suspicious exiled adventurer, who visits unannounced and may pose a great danger. Strange enough, the one who is exaggeratedly panicking is Ed, and he's screaming in terror even though what Miss Elf wants is only for him to take off his robe. Thus, Tia grabs the sewing kit and fixes the tears in the guy's cape, while ensuring that orange fruits won't be sour using Ed's simple method. Therefore, he turns it into a bet where the fruit not getting sweet will allow Tia to ask one question, regardless of what it is. What happens after is definitely surprising, though, as the elf orders Ed to feed her, causing the guy to reply with a cruel, "Eat it yourself," even though it's obvious that Tia's hands are busy sewing. Well, I'm sure some of you will unquestionably do it, so let me make you jealous by showing Ed putting the food in the girl's mouth despite the evidence shaking. Now how's that? Yeah, undoubtedly sour, according to Miss Elf's face. Immediately, Ed checks the flavor to confirm if it really is acidic, like what Tia says, and learns that it tastes sweet for the most part, so this girl is just lying. Tia wants to continue playing around though, saying they used to do it in the past, which leads Ed to reveal that the elf's affectionate actions are, for him, one-sided teasing. Thanks to that, the banished adventurer comments about the unchanging personality of Miss Elf, who is revealed to be over 100 years old, and is surely the old woman Ed was talking about earlier. the banished adventurer smiles and comments how expected it is for the woman who exiled him from the party to maintain such a playful personality. But he has really messed up this time because Tia's mood changes from jolly to one devoid of a smile, forcing Ed to explain that he's just reminiscing good old times and harbors no grudge whatsoever. Unfortunately, Tia is not listening to his explanations and starts to apologize, so Ed takes the liberty to bow and beg for forgiveness. In spite of his desperate efforts, Miss Elf continues feeling apologetic and finally reveals her main concern. Or you can even call it fear of being blamed by Ed due to the fact that she's the only one among the hero party who has survived. Instead of comforting Tia, Ed proceeds to ask about the tragic backstory, and the sewing needles start the dark flashback of Alexis's and the others' fate. Before you know it, the story brings us to the past, right in the time when Ed is exiled and Tia, along with the whole group, is finding someone to replace him. That doesn't go well, however, as the party is already near the front line, so all who want to join are warriors greedy for achievements and not baggage carriers who will protect their luggage so they can fight as hard as they can without the interruption of such adventurers. In the end, the hero party hired 6 people who then quit without even staying for too long, forcing them to recruit a professional porter who also left after 3 months. Man, he must have hated the job, whoever that is. Tia reveals that the baggage bearer has done a great job carrying their pieces of luggage, but he fails to do general household chores like laundry and cooking, unlike Ed, who worked more than the assigned tasks in his good old days at the party. Of course, we know the guy is just desperate not to get kicked out earlier than expected, but Alexis demands the same thing from the new recruits, thinking that Ed's service is the norm. Thanks to that, the porter resigns and advises the hero party to hire a personal servant if they want someone to do the chores, which is actually understandable. Obviously, Prince Alexis might be the wrong one here, as he turns out to be an exploitative employer. According to Tia, the man replied to the porter, "Then get out." So yeah, his mind may be screwed. Putting that aside, Miss Elf is getting swallowed by regret, as she then reveals that it is those times when they realize the true value of the one she has exiled. One can't really blame her though, or maybe some callous otaku might want to, and you have half of my permission. Before that, watch Tia gritting her teeth in frustration because their group has reached rock bottom as no one wants to join them anymore. That will change, however, when a masked porter volunteers to be their bag carrier while doing household chores. The 3 instantly accept the proposal because the man looks trustworthy enough and, not suspicious. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Thus, the hero party continues their advance until they finally make it to the forest in the demon world, where the obvious twist finally kicks off. In the Demon King's domain, gigantic monsters execute the warmest welcome they can give their enemies. Tia has a hunch, so she immediately prepares for the battle, but with a tragic twist of fate, the porter runs away, his figure disappearing in a blue light with all the healing potions and magic tools the man is carrying. Ed has shocked, wide-opened eyes as it turns out that the blue light is a teleportation crystal that is actually prepared for the 4 of them to use in case of emergency, and is entrusted to the luggage bearer so as not to accidentally break and activate them. With all the information so far, Ed concludes that the porter has been planning to deceive Alexis and the others since the beginning, and is just looking for opportunities to do one of the so-called anime betrayals. The banished adventurer is having a hard time calming himself down, but even Tia is not sure if that's really the case, so she tells the continuation of the story. Having no other choice, Miss Elf fights their strong, colossal adversaries using magic until a demonic beast manages to sneak behind her, forcing Gonzo to use his strength to protect Tia. Unfortunately, even that bulky warrior knows that their situation is hopeless, so he urges Alexis to start their countermeasure plan of using the single teleportation crystal hidden in the hero's chest so he can return and continue giving hope to humanity and him alone. Tia bids goodbye and accepts her fate, but what she receives is an apology from Alexis, who then gives her the item, kneeling as he tells Miss Elf that it's impossible for him to abandon his comrades and survive alone. Therefore, Alexis breaks the teleportation crystal and forces it to activate while it's still in Tia's grasp. He mutters yet to be revealed, but surely words of goodbye to the elf, but that is already the end, and it's too late for Tia to drag that man to safety anymore. While his former companion is crying, Ed contemplates Alexis's decision to choose pride rather than his mission as a hero. And although it's a good thing that Tia is alive, her cries are more than enough for Ed to conclude that it is not just Alexis who can't survive by abandoning his friends. Thus, in the middle of the deep forest, the sobbing of the elf is the only noise echoing. Eventually, Tia calms down with the help of some head pats by Ed, so she apologizes for showing such an embarrassing display while thanking the banished adventurer for listening to her. The mood surrounding the two is the same as minutes ago, however, and it turns out that the backstory doesn't end there as Tia proceeds on the continuation, this time when she is transferred to a secret room in the castle of Notland. The royal attendants are absolutely displeased when they see Tia returning alone and assume that the girl steals Alexis's teleportation crystal, which adds to the elf's depression as her mind is as messy as it is. Soon after, the king arrives and asks what happened to his son, Alexis, causing Tia to explain the whole story without hiding anything. The king's actions are not what you would expect because he advises the elf to hide in the middle of nowhere, making the pretense that the hero party has been wiped out after crossing the demon world. At first, Ed seems to be shocked by the king's decision until he realizes that His Majesty is doing the right thing due to Alexis weighing the world's future against the lives of his comrades and choosing the latter, even though it's wrong from others' perspective. However, they know that all of that is for the precious elf to live regardless of the consequences, leading Ed to realize that the king is just respecting his son's final wish. Due to that, Tia is unable to join the 3 following expeditions to the demon world. But wait, what expeditions? Ed is as dumb as rock when it comes to these things, considering he has lived so far away that it transcends other worlds. So our oblivious Miss Elf simply smiles in response to the clueless adventurer. Then, she reveals that the kingdom's allied nation has sent reinforcements 3 times in hopes that they can rescue the hero, only to fail in the end. Yeah, unfortunate. More importantly, how does Ed learn Tia's location even though it's a top secret? Miss Elf wonders about the inevitable, so the banished adventurer reveals the magical stalking tool that allows him to search for people, which also leads him to wonder where in the world everyone in the group is, and discovers that Alexis and Gonzo are already beneath some rocks, if you remember that. Tia doesn't see it with her own eyes, but Ed's words become the elf's confirmation as she shakes her head to refuse the guy's apology, because there's no need for that in the first place. For Tia, coming face to face with reality is more than enough. But before Ed can make another serious remark, Miss Elf presents the cute flower-designed Stitch with an equally adorable look without a hint of remorse whatsoever. The banished adventurer is definitely pleased by what this girl has done, and it's finally getting good again when a loud vibration that seems like an earthquake interrupts a wholesome scene between the two. I swear, whoever caused this needs a good scolding. Fortunately, Ed feels the same way, so he hurriedly wears the robe and goes outside to see what kind of danger is threatening their reunion. What welcomes his eyes, however, is a not-so-large lesser dragon, raring to fight for survival against the elf and her unannounced visitor. Ed wonders if this winged beast is a stray that comes from the mountains, but Tia's concern is far from that because Miss Elf wants her ex-teammate to get back into the house. She reassures Ed not to worry because the lesser dragon will be handled by her, but that said monster is charging its breath and firing it while they are taking their time talking. Before the attack reaches them, Ed faces it head-on, saying it's a piece of cake, only to get dragged away from Tia to pull the guy behind. A natural flamethrower grills the two and makes a barbecue out of them. Or not. As expected, the famous elf who was once a member of the hero party manages to defend using magic that, according to the dumbfounded Ed, is a water wall. To the returnee's surprise, Tia swears to protect his life as she then starts a long chant while the lesser dragon flaps his wings and attempts to use its large claws to end the mage. In the nick of time, the magic spell, Tri-Edge Stream, cuts the winged beast from his head to many other parts in a span of seconds. Witnessing this spectacle forces Ed to let out a dumb noise, and he's pretty amazed by the single-blow victory that his eyes have sparkling stars showing. The guy continues prattling in front of the perfectly cut dragon meat and yells about how amazing Tia is. But the elf isn't the slightest bit happy nor irritated, and instead begs Ed to get out of the place. Out of the blue, Miss Elf is panting, and fortunately, it's not a slice-of-life anime where a single cough may prove fatal. Okay, forgive the joke. Nonetheless, Ed notices that Tia is acting strange, so he asks the girl verbatim, "Tia, what's wrong?" Only to see Miss Elf trembling while catching her breath. She eventually reveals that it's because of overexerting herself and showing off, though, and tells Ed she's now fine before trying to enter the house, albeit exhausted, as it's her first fight after a long time. Despite the fatigue, Tia shows a cutesy peace sign while bragging how amazing she is, and heads toward her room right after. Due to their lighthearted exchange, Ed believes that Tia will be okay as she is from the hero party after all. Yet he still can't stop wondering why the elf wants him to go away earlier. In the end, dragon meat gets the best of Ed, and he thinks of putting them inside the Wanderer's treasury to eat it later. Not sure if they taste good, though. Don't want to know either. Amidst all that pondering and corny jokes, Ed hears a loud thud from inside, so he wastes no time and calls Tia to ask what's wrong. The carefree tone will disappear at this point as the adventurer hurriedly climbs the ladder toward the room and finds Miss Elf lying on the ground. Ed panics and asks the girl what happened for her to fall like this, but he sees a more shocking sight enveloping Tia's body. Eventually, Miss Elf faces Ed's way, allowing the banished adventurer to see the dark scales, which turn out to be black bruises spreading from the girl's heart all over her body. In simpler terms, a patch of lifeless skin. Finally, Tia speaks a word, asking Ed to grab the clothes right next to her. Needless to say, he does as the elf requests and eventually puts her on the bed, where Ed then asks about Tia's condition. She first thanks the exiled adventurer before answering and revealing that she used the elf's secret technique in her last fight with Alexis and Gonzo, hoping they could survive. What's disturbing is the spell's nature, which explosively increases the power of spirit magic by mixing the user's own life with it. Slowly but accurately, Ed learns that the price paid for a special skill to activate is the elf's own lifespan, causing the adventurer to be hysterical as he wonders why it is so sudden when she was perfectly fine earlier. It's not too long when Ed realizes, thanks to Tia averting eye contact, that her lifespan decreases rapidly due to the water spells cast against the lesser dragon. As if this is not serious, Miss Elf giggles while explaining that she did it to prevent Ed from reuniting with Alexis in the hands of the winged beast. Although this eye-to-eye contact is 101% adorable, Ed contemplates why Tia thinks the lesser dragon can eliminate him, and concludes that his former companion is not yet aware of his current abilities. On another note, Tia informs Ed that she doesn't have enough magic power to live, if not for the clothes that allow her to share mana that the tree is also gathering. Thus, taking off those clothing while using a powerful spell means that this elf doesn't have much time anymore. Ed yells as he asks why she changed her outfit, even though the magical dress might have been in her body for years, especially if you still remember Tia mentioning there's no bath in her house. Elve's scent must be unique if this girl doesn't need to take a bath then. Jokes aside, Tia just wants to bring back the old days when their hero party was having what seemed to be endless fun, despite knowing that it's impossible to fill the empty seats with the same happiness as back then. Unfortunately, Tia's magic power slipping out also means that monsters have already noticed her, making Ed frustrated because all of these will not happen if he doesn't infect Tia with bad luck by visiting her place. Ed blames himself for the elf's approaching tragic fate, which contradicts his wish to ensure Tia's safety, confusing Miss Elf, who is wondering why her friend is acting this way. However, seeing Ed's disoriented state worries Tia as she holds the man's face and puts her forehead next to him, reassuring Ed that she has lived to the fullest. Miss Elf feels glad that she made good friends along the way and reunites with the man she exiled in the past. But Ed is not satisfied by ending it like this and wants them to spend more time together. Unfortunately, the Russells outside interrupt their conversation, but the banished adventurer knows that they are the enemies commencing their raid. Tia immediately orders Ed to run away, but he instantly refuses to do that, even how much the elf pleads and starts telling her about the immense change he undergoes, despite his unchanging appearance thanks to the White World's time flow. Ed then reminisces about the experiences he has acquired over the course of 100 years in 100 worlds, adventures that Tia couldn't even imagine. Finally, the adventurer stops looking down and faces the elf, declaring that he is now stronger than ever before, announcing his will to be the one who protects Tia this time around. Facing the horde of monsters outside, Ed is having the protagonist moment, filled with absolute confidence to take down all the insects surrounding the elf's beloved house. Amidst the man's intimidating aura, Tia is firmly determined to drag him away from the danger, only to receive the reply, "I'll never leave Tia alone again," along with a convincing promise that this former luggage bearer will do exactly that at all costs. In spite of her condition, the elf desperately stands up to help the exiled adventurer, who, on the other hand, is having no problems mowing down the demonic beasts, albeit aware that doing this will not help his friend regain the lifespan she lost. "I know that," these words play repeatedly in Ed's mind while he's fighting a golem. But this man will not allow Tia's fate to end this way because he desperately wants to save the elf. Willing to grasp a miracle or just anything that will help Tia, Ed uses his exiled skill of swordsmithing using his own red body fluid and slashes through the monsters, going in a calm yet melancholic rampage to obliterate every one of the presumptuous demonic beasts. Tia manages to go outside after the obstacles, but what the elf sees is the figure of Ed standing atop the enemies he tramples one-sidedly. At that moment, the Otherworld returnee remembers the ability he acquired right before entering this world, the one-time use skill, which might be the miracle he's looking for. Glancing at the gorgeous elf, Ed stumbles into the most awaited idea of using that to start over again and save Tia in the process. Well, before that, let's rewind time a little bit, shall we? Years ago, Ed barges into Tia's room as it turns out that the elf calls him, but it doesn't seem to be the case because what greets the guy's lucky pervy eyes is a rare sight of the elf changing clothes. Tia screams in shock due to the incident while Ed has a satisfied smile, although it won't last long as he immediately receives the maiden's disappointment, along with the how cute Kaguya face, expelling him out of the party. The poor guy unquestionably leaves, allowing Alexis to comment about Tia's elaborate way of banishing the baggage carrier. But it turns out Miss Elf feels bitter about this whole thing because all she wants is to protect Ed, and let him see a peaceful world even if he ends up hating her. Although it's definitely not the case in the present, Ed is undeniably strong now to the point that he can finally protect not just the elf's smile, but Tia's everything. Of course, it's inevitable that Miss Elf is surprised at his battle prowess, so Ed reveals training after being kicked out, but it seems like Tia is more concerned about something else, as she then makes a request to Ed to take her to the border of the demon world. At first, hearing those words shocks Ed to the very core, but seeing the nervous elf knocks some sense in him, and he pats Tia's head, assuring the girl that he'll take her along even if it's the end of the world. And you think he's the same guy who panics in the presence of a woman? Think again. Ed doesn't bother to ask Tia's reason either, as he already has an idea what that is, and all this banished adventurer needs to do now is to head out and fulfill Tia's wish. Amidst the deep night, the terrain, and the hindrances along the way, Ed eventually arrives at the location where Miss Elf wants to go. She then gets down from her former companion's back and wanders in the not-so-wide wasteland where monster fossils are abundant, which is also the place where Alexis transfers the teleportation crystal in the past. Thanking Ed for transporting her here, Tia talks to the graves of Alexis and Gonzo, and brags to them how powerful their luggage bearer is, and even jokes that he's stronger than the hero now. Well, for sure. Unfortunately, the light banter comes to a swift end as Tia now talks about her thoughts when she kicks Ed out of their hero party. The mood gets more sorrowful each second when Miss Elf reflects on her wish not to see the weak Ed suffer, and regrets not believing in his strength. The banished adventurer sits next to Tia, who wonders what would happen if she doesn't do something unnecessary like banishing Ed. Will the situation turn better? As the elf looks at the far distance, she imagines a peaceful world where the Demon King is defeated, and there are no sad moments like this. Even though Ed tries to reply, his words are cut short by Tia's thank you, while leaning her head to the guy's shoulders and wishing that she could also grant his wish. Looking down, Ed reassures Tia that it will come true very soon, allowing the elf to hold hands with her former companion. "Prepare your tissues, folks. We're going downhill." In reply to Tia's question, Ed reveals his wish to go home, to which Miss Elf replies she wants to see the guy's house too. Ed tells Tia that she's more than welcome to come and happily talks about how they should buy souvenirs for Dad and Mom while introducing the girl to them and his friends. At this point, Tia's body color is becoming lighter and lighter, but Ed continues his excited talk, this time about his exiled skills and how omnipotent he is thanks to them. In the middle of it, however, Tia, closing his eyes, leads the adventurer to start crying, and finally begins breaking down when the elf bites the dust, the petals crumbling away along with the girl's demise. The starry sky creating a fantastic view doesn't fit the adventurer's mood as he tears out while wondering if this too is a part of God's plan. Clenching his fist, Ed talks to that God, reminding him how he's been dancing around in his palms all this time, but then declares out of rage that he'll continue to do so until a hole appears there. Speech 100. It doesn't end there because Ed raises his hands and announces a bunch of cool words along with the activation of the final exiled skill, one-time claim. A ray of light shines upon the banished adventurer, an illumination that stretches from outside the world's atmosphere and colors the man's vision into pure white. When Ed wakes up, the first thing he sees is a chair and a table in a place where everything is enveloped with white. Is this a dream? I'm pretty sure it's not, Ed. Fortunately, he realizes that afterward, but this guy is exaggeratedly panicking while wondering how he ended up in this strange place. Wait, this man's acting weirder than this realm. How come Ed doesn't remember the events, and all he can recall is the time of exterminating claw moles in his original world? It seems like the exiled skill drains the guy's memory down to its last bits of otherworldly adventures or something like that. But the single door in front of him is turning that theory upside down, given there's 100 of them in the past. Out of the blue, a book lands on the table and surprises this banished adventurer down to the very core, because what lies before him is a white book. There's no choice but to read it, isn't there? As a result, Ed learns that he is exiled from his original world, and he needs to join 100 isekai, get banished from each of their own hero parties, and then go home. Of course, the young lad won't accept such an absurd mission as he is just a small-time adventurer, so it's practically impossible to join the group led by a hero in the first place. But while he's in the middle of complaining, Ed sees the crystal ball shining and assumes there's a powerful skill reward upon touching it. Poor guy just wants to go home, but as if he has another choice. Albeit reluctant, Ed grasps the ball with his hand, allowing the information to go directly to his head, although it is an ability that, for him, is rather useless, as it just enables the man to inevitably meet the hero. Sounds convenient to me, though, but the twist kicks off here. A censored image of Alexis, Gonzo, and Tia surfaces on Ed's mind, but he has no idea who they are at this point, and is completely puzzled by the three's identity. Even so, he maintains his hands on the mystical ball and suddenly receives shocking, overloaded data rushing directly to his head. Ed screams in agony as he obtains the memories of someone he doesn't know yet, until the adventurer realizes that all of these are his experiences in other worlds of meeting heroes and getting exiled 100 times. Unfortunately, this series of shattering recollections is too painful for Ed, yet it will not end until he goes on all fours, shrieking in pain from the exploding, forced reminiscence along with the words of his past self, reminding him that they can change the past this way. Eventually, Tia's question surfaces, and the face of the gorgeous elf appears clearly in Ed's vision, signaling the end of the suffering on a good, memorable note. Pain is evident in the banished adventurer, but he now knows what his wish is, and declares that he won and outwitted the god. Ed stands up and reveals that he acquires the power of the 101st or whatever that is, in exchange for the one-time claim, allowing him to deceive the god with a skill, Blessing of the Second Lap. Mystery solved as it turns out that Ed returns to the past while inheriting the memories and abilities of his future self, even though it'll be the last time he can utilize this miracle. Therefore, Ed can't help but remember the flower-designed stitch in his robe made specifically by his beloved Miss Elf. Now he is brimming with motivation and desire while standing before door 001, contemplating the terrible ending awaiting him in each of every 100 doors. This time is different, however, because Ed won't stray away from his wish to see a peaceful world where he can toast happily together with his companions. Revenge due to banishment? It's not even delicious. Ed will turn the future into happy endings as he finally enters the door to begin the second lap of his isekai adventure. In the city somewhere in the other world, we can see a knife slicing a steak, and of course a male adventurer, Karen, complaining to Alexis about why a capable combatant like himself is getting rejected to join their adventuring party. The hero, Alexis, is calm amidst all of the man's yelling until he glares upon replying to the adventurer's complaints, implying he looks good enough to become their baggage carrier. Stop the low-key insults there, Alexis. We know you're strong and sarcastic. Well, according to the bystanders, that applicant is already the third one who got rejected, so they, specifically the girls, are daydreaming about being a part of the hero party in their stead and basking in Alexis's elegance in the process. However, a strange gaze catches the hero's attention, causing Alexis to turn around and see for himself what that is. Thus, this heartthrob hero accidentally glares at his fans, and they clearly like what's going on, contrary to Alexis, who wonders what in the world he noticed earlier. That mystery will be answered more quickly than he expects when a cloaked Ed shows up and asks Alexis if he's interested in recruiting the strongest luggage carrier and swordsman like himself. Surprised, Alexis wonders who the mysterious job applicant is, And it seems like the crowd has the same question as the hero, because who else will arrive and act suspiciously like this? It's Ed, and he introduces himself as a wandering adventurer to his former companion, whom he hasn't seen for years. This time around, Ed will not let himself become a mere baggage carrier again like last time when he practically begs them to take him in. Not to mention, this guy offers to work to the bone without a single penny a salary. Man, that's rough. Nonetheless, Ed plans to become a swordsman on top of being a porter, so he can have equal control along their journey. Of course, it's inevitable for Alexis not to doubt the words of a stranger, so he asks him the obvious question of how a combatant will fight while carrying a large weight, causing Ed to challenge the hero in some sort of a duel to show off his worth, a battle while maintaining the meat in the plate. The sudden impact brought by a single strike of a fork signals the acceptance of the war-freak hero. Simply put, if Ed manages not to drop the luggage, Alexis will wholeheartedly welcome him to the team. Whoa, scary. Ed doesn't flinch a bit, however, the complete opposite of the bar owner whose table is crushed earlier. Please zoom him in, editor. Anyways, Ed allows Alexis to start whenever he can, but the attack goes straight to pierce his eyes, not even giving him a chance to properly end that sentence. The job applicant deflects the weapon while defending the meat against the hero's fork and acts a little bit arrogant to provoke the hero. Despite that, Alexis is still calm, and they even talk about how not tasty a cold steak is, which Ed then uses as an opportunity to ask for an early surrender. But as if Alexis will give up when he continues the advance using a single utensil against the applicant's cheap sword, even climbing up the roof of the houses to go on with Ed's practical interview. Thanks to the exchange of blows, the hero's fork finally gives up. So a slight pause in the duel ensues, with Ed getting confident that he's successful in earning even a bit of Alexis's trust, although this guy is still talking about the steak and taunts the hero once more. As a result, Alexis turns serious as he finally unsheathes his mighty sword, prepared to use it against the luggage carrier instead of the destroyed fork. The hero swings the weapon to hit Ed, but the guy's speed allows him to fight equally, parrying the blade while exchanging blows against the oh-so-strong hero before commenting on his performance somewhere along the lines of, "Is this all you can do?" Of course not. Well, Alexis says that, and he's the one who replies to Ed's provocations with a sword slash powered up with an absurdly strong skill that sends the arrogant porter applicant flying. Moreover, Ed's cheap iron sword is reaching its limit. Yet that's not the most concerning part, because the cold steak bids goodbye to the plate, and Ed is sweating buckets in fear of losing the meat. Unfortunately, the hero's battle stance shows no mercy anymore, and he's gung-ho to punish the haughty swordsman for tirelessly running his big mouth by using the dazzling ability the true heroes strike, Moonlight Sword. Alexis releases the notorious blade wave and sends it straight to Ed, who, on the other hand, refuses to use his exiled skill, Impregnable Fortress, to defend himself from the hero's defense, and instead wants to resort to a different method, a way where Alexis will surely acknowledge him as a companion. Ed twists his body midair and plans to overcome this test using mainly swordsmanship. When Alexis sees that, he strangely signals someone to do something that isn't clear yet at this point, and spoilers aren't forgivable anyway. Nonetheless, Ed matches the direction of his sword swing to the slash, and ultimately parries the hero-like ability while doing a sick body spin. Alexis simply watches as Ed falls from above and safely lands afterward, sighing in relief for the success of defending even without the impregnable fortress. Although the iron sword is now in this state, suddenly the crowd yells in celebration to praise the porter applicant for fighting toe-to-toe against the legendary hero. The girls earlier seemed to change their focus of love from Alexis to the mysterious cloaked swordsman too, though it's unfortunate they don't know his name. To the rescue, here is the old man from way back who makes his appearance again to tell the ignorant ladies that Ed is Ed. They didn't hear it earlier after all. Thanks to those girls, this scavenger will remain as an unintroduced character because they don't listen to what his name is. Thus, we'll still call him unfitting nicknames, given he'll show up in the story again, of course. Meanwhile, Alexis approaches Ed with his sword sheathed, only to get scolded by the aspiring porter who reminds him that using the skill earlier might have ended the target's life. Turns out the hero is not as dumb as you think, as he has already considered that, but someone's yell agreeing to Ed echoes to surprise them. The monk, Gonzo, arrives and praises Ed, saying he might be unable to take a serious attack from the hero as the guy did. Furthermore, Gonzo reveals that Alexis actually signals him to jump in if things get serious, which answers his strange actions earlier, but definitely doesn't ease the monk's confusion as to how Ed knows him. Of course, it's because Gonzo is the strongest martial artist with, let me emphasize this, legendary healing hands and strong muscles as a side note. While they're bursting into laughter, however, a familiar voice shocks Ed as he hears Miss Elf irritatingly asking the hero what in the world they are doing when they should be preparing for their leave. She also scolds Alexis for using a dangerous skill and rebukes Gonzo for not stopping him. As expected of an over 100-year-old elf, she can tell off these young'uns. Jokes aside, Ed feels nostalgic even though it's the first meeting with her as his past self, and age are of no importance this time like it has always been when it comes to elves, as Tia, who is asking him if he's okay, still looks gorgeous for Ed. Wondering if he's okay, Tia checks if the banished adventurer is hurt before introducing her full name, Lunaritia, and exchanges pleasantries with him. Therefore, Ed reveals his name and occupation, but his vision blurs along the way because he's just happy to see Tia's smile again, making this man burst into tears of happiness and relief. After all, Ed's beloved elf is alive and talking in front of him, even though she's petrified by the aspiring porter's sudden sobbing. Thus, Tia panics and wonders if she says something wrong, eventually asking Alexis if he's the one who made the boy cry. The hero is confident it is not his doing, though, and goes full narcissistic mode, telling them that it might be because of his out-of-the-ordinary existence, which annoys Tia because she's fed up with the egomaniac. Soon after, the crybaby wipes his tears and says it's just overwhelming for a mere adventurer like himself to exchange introductions with the famous hero party. It's still a bit hard to believe for Tia, but worries get the best of her, leading this elf to ask if there's anything she can do to help. Ed wonders if Tia can say his name one more time, so Miss Elf does as he says, and the banished adventurer is already satisfied with that, causing Tia to giggle at the fact that someone cheers up by just having his name spoken. However, Alexis knows the real reason why the strange applicant tears out, and he shows it by pointing toward the meat, aka luggage, that he's supposed to protect, meaning he fails to join their adventuring party. After staring at it for a few seconds with a dumbfounded face, Ed wakes up to reality and bursts into tears, while blaming the Moonlight Sword for his failure. Tia is just as surprised that they won't accept Ed, even though he can fight toe-to-toe with the hero. When Alexis questions that, Miss Elf reminds everyone about the hero using a special skill that leads the crowd to testify the truth. Therefore, the hero can't help but ask Tia why she wants to accept Ed, but it seems like Miss Elf is acting out of whim, and she even coaxes the bystanders to go blay at the hero. This 100-year-old legal elf is childish as one expects. Afterward, it is Gonzo's turn to express his opinions, and it seems like he doesn't mind Ed joining until Tia's face looks worried after hearing him saying it's still a problem, because they can put too much stress on the porter if he's also serving them as a combatant. Gonzo's opinions will turn from 0 to 10 points, however, when Ed frustratingly expresses his regret of not being able to learn the glory of muscle from the monk himself. As a result, Alexis is forced to admit Ed's strength as a swordsman, but the next concern is a different question, as the hero tosses a coin to the adventurer, reminds him that they're specifically looking for a porter, and challenges Ed to buy all the goods he deems as necessary and bring it to them. With Alexis's provocation, which also sounds like a test, Ed smirks from confidence to prove to the hero that he really is the world's best baggage carrier. Before it begins, a flashback ensues, and we can see the hero party giving the same challenge to Ed, although the atmosphere is more tense. Regardless, the otherworld transferee takes the task head-on, even though the money given is a mere 10 silver coins. This time around, it upgrades into a grand 1 gold coin, which also means that this guy is being trusted more than before, especially 1 gold, which is equal to a staggering 100 silvers and 10,000 bronze. Therefore, Ed heads to the market with none other than Miss Elf, who is accompanying the luggage carrier in his final test, although she's pretty amazed that this town has a marketplace for commoners. At the same time, Tia feels annoyed that Ed is calling her with an honorific when he refers to her as Tia, and not Tia-san earlier. All of this is because Miss Elf is a senpai after all. She's quite pushy to force Ed into dropping the honorifics though, so the banished boy is left with no choice but to compromise and continue shopping with the curious elf, who is eager to watch how Ed handles the budget. Amidst the unpleasant glares they receive, Ed asks why Tia is so careless to trust a complete stranger, only to be reminded that this elven mage is not your typical elf in most harem isekai anime. Not only is she strong, but also not a tsundere, and Tia seems to have a strong feeling that Ed is a good person. Thanks to this, the adventurer notices the elf's over-friendliness, mainly because of her invading personal space a bit like it's nothing, and realizes that Tia isn't like this from the beginning. leading Ed to wonder if Miss Elf also has her memories from the original timeline. Meanwhile, at the bar, Gonzo asks Alexis if it's a good idea to let Tia be with a guy they just met. In reply, the hero allows Tia to do whatever she wants, because the main reason seems to be the fact that the carefree elf won't even care for their words. In case you don't notice, Alexis is smashing the table with a hammer like it's nothing, so the bar owner stops him despite trembling as he doesn't want to bother the famous hero. Alexis refuses to give up the role of fixing the table. However, as he wants to take full responsibility for the inconvenience he caused. Unexpectedly, this man is 100% better than the trash heroes out there, although I can't choose who to mention specifically. Well, you decide. Soon after, Alexis presents his astonishing masterpiece after turning that plain wooden board into a luxurious table. Undeniably absurd skills from a beginner, maybe he'll convert into an artisan sooner or later. But while the amazed crowd is praising the hero, Alexis is bothered by something as he urges Gonzo to go to a particular place. The same topic is discussed when the story returns to Ed and Tia, where the latter is asking the former if something is bothering him. There is no beating around the bush, and Ed reveals that he's wondering why the elf seems to be comfortable around him. But Tia, unfortunately, has no exact idea either. She mentions that elves live longer than humans, and in her 100 years of life, Tia must have forgotten a lot of things despite carving some of the important memories in her soul. This phenomenon that occurs through demise and rebirth will allow some moments in life to be engraved in one's heart, which is the main reason nostalgia befalls a person or a place, even if it's their first time seeing it. Unsurprisingly, this is what has occurred to Tia when she sees Ed's face earlier, something that, for the porter, is a case similar to a déjà vu but limited to elves. However, Tia has a more profound belief because she thinks that the two of them had a really close bond somehow, and somewhere before they became who they are now. Hearing those words moves the heart of the banished adventurer, and he smiles in response while acting like a personal knight escorting his beloved elf. Thus, the not-so-bright shopping spree continues with a wholesome moment between the two, triggering some marine engines to activate and the ship set sail. Some time passes, and it's already evening when Ed and Tia return to the tavern that definitely doesn't look like what it was earlier. Those two are downright speechless by the spectacle they're seeing, and I don't know if you still remember Alexis bothered by something, but that particular thing is right there sparkling amidst the night sky, thanks to the hero/craftsman's talent. Putting that aside, Alexis checks the test date only to be told by Tia, who is strangely excited that Ed is amazing. That said, the guy just whistles at their lack of luggage before showing the heap of supplies he bought from the marketplace earlier, and explains to the surprised folks that they have enough ration, with some preserved for 3 months and the remaining for a year. Ed mentions hearing from Tia that they won't leave for a while, so they're all preserved, but Gonzo is more surprised at how the porter can carry all of those without a large bag. Therefore, the banished adventurer shows them a magic tool that he found in a certain ruin, which basically works like the bottomless pocket of some blue-white futuristic cat, yet it's more than enough to astonish Alexis and Gonzo. Furthermore, Ed lies, and says he's the only one who can use the item since picking it up, which eventually gets proved by Tia, who fails to put herself inside like some kind of a furball. Of course, it will not work because this is not a fantasy catgirl manga, so please don't get your hopes high, fellow weebs. Regrettably, the method of making it look like a tool, rather than the ability, is Ed's way to conveniently be exiled from the hero party when the time comes. Though I know it's as clear as day for you viewers. It won't hurt to reveal that Ed uses the Wanderer's treasury to the bag and deceives others to believe it's just a magic tool. Deceit 100. Then, he informs Alexis that the small bag can contain up to 3 warehouses worth, even though the reality screams that it can hold the scale of entire worlds. This guy spouts lies as he breathes. Someone pierced this man with a dango. See, even Tia fully believes those words and is acting smug about it, reminding Alexis that they can go on an adventure for an entire year with such supplies. Little do they know that it's not the end of the presentation, as Ed then shows the main present, a magical tool that can create water. Please give it a more fitting name, Doraemon. With this, Ed proves that he can carry heavy things with the magical bag, but Alexis is not pleased, and he informs the porter that they already have a way of acquiring water thanks to Tia's spirit magic, which leaves the question as to why Ed shows this. Miss Elf also reveals that the item is worth a staggering 50 silver coins, but Alexis ponders when he hears that, as the hero knows that a valuable thing should cost at least 5 gold coins. Putting the bargaining price aside, Ed begins his explanation by reminding them of the apparent fact regarding using magic to get drinking water. However, the real appears next, as Ed tells them that they can't use Tia's spirit magic if she falls sick or injured. finally convincing the two to agree with that reasoning. The elf is dissatisfied with being treated as a mere convenience, however, but Alexis's acknowledgement of Ed regains the girl's spirit to the point that she's becoming smug again. Finally, the hero fulfills his promise of accepting Ed to their group, so the three celebrate this happy event, until Gonzo suggests their new porter put adamantium in his magic bag for, you've guessed it, muscle training. On the other hand, Alexis catches sight of something among Ed's supplies, eventually grabbing the iron sword and taking a not-so-long look at it, before expressing his disappointment while pushing the scabbard onto the porter's chest, saying that the cheap blade doesn't match his talent. In response, Ed informs them that it's a mere disposable weapon until they reach the next town, and tells the hero about his proposal. Using the knowledge he has regarding the 6 months' adventures in this world in his past timeline, Ed reveals a suspenseful something to Alexis with a self-satisfied, cunning smirk. Time passes after that mysterious proposal, and the group embarks on a journey to the mining and forging town of Atorum Tyne. Standing excitedly at a dangerous spot in the carriage is Miss Elf, who looks so elated upon seeing the smokestacks, and assumes that there are a bunch of blacksmiths here creating sick weapons. Surprisingly, it's not the case in this particular forging town, according to Alexis, who also reveals that Atorum Tyne specializes in silverware. Eventually, they wander into the place where Tia sees a smith, and realizes that the treasure Ed wants to grab here is a knife that makes everything delicious. That is far from the truth, but I'd rather have that for all purposes. Soon after, they arrive in an inn-like place known as the Silver Stove, where Alexis takes the leader's seat and starts the meeting by urging Ed to explain his plan in detail. Therefore, the porter begins by informing them that this information is from an unspecified, reliable source, which is him, by the way, and reveals that a rockworm has built a den in this town. The news shocks the 3 other members of the hero party, as this is a serious situation, because the said monster devours anything silver and leaves giant fissures, which will ultimately lead to large-scale destruction. Ed knows all of these thanks to his memories, where Atorum Tyne falls into ruins approximately 3 months from now due to the rockworm wreaking havoc, and it was far too late when they arrived. Fortunately, the tragedy can be avoided this time, and the hero now also knows the situation, although he's wondering why Ed doesn't notify the authorities about this threat, even though its danger level is definitely not a joke, but with no physical evidence. The swordsman/porter cannot risk it, and on top of that, this guy wants to have that silver-eating rockworm all for themselves. The hero party. Those words lead Alexis to realize that the treasure Ed mentions that is lying in this town is none other than a mithril, to which Ed replies with a single smirk that answers yes to the hero's conclusion. Tia, on the other hand, has zero idea what in the world they're talking about, so she asks Gonzo what the relationship is between rockworms and mithril, but it seems like the muscle brain monk doesn't know about it too, so there's a need for Alexis to confirm how much information do these two know. As a result, Tia prattles about how amazing mithril is, because they can conduct and store mana to ultimately be used for top-tier magical tools and weapons. An important note from Tia, the way it sparkles is so pretty. However, Alexis is disappointed, so he asks Ed to explain it, causing the porter to tell Miss Elf about the truth. Mithril is formed when silver is exposed to strong magic for an extended period, but it doesn't mean that the mine is overflowing with mana. Instead, it comes from a nearby rockworm, which is also just half correct. Amused, Ed bombards Tia with hints regarding the relationship between the silver-eating rockworm and the mithril, until they arrive at a revelation that silver turns into the said metal in the particular monster's stomach. Ed puts it simply for dummies to understand, and informs Tia that the mithril she's so impressed with is the rockworm's undigested excrement. Remember that important note? Well, Miss Elf bears it in mind so clearly. Anyway, the discussion continues with Alexis asking how Ed will use the rare metal upon acquiring it. So the all-around porter declares that he'll prepare the best weapons for their party by utilizing the excrement that sparkles so pretty. Unfortunately, the poor elf is still crying, and it looks like it'll take a really long time for her to recover from the shock. Meanwhile, in the mines, unnamed workers are on their way home, even though their shifts haven't ended yet until a man who looks like their superior scolds and orders them to return and continue their job. Therefore, a workman informs his oblivious boss about the hero's evacuation notice, forbidding the miners to enter for the rest of the day, and offering them compensation for the lost income. Pay time off, huh? Wish you had that. At the least, the workers in this mine will take their rest, while the hero party, on the other hand, is already heading to the location where the rockworm might be located. Tia is still mad about earlier, however, and she lashes out at Ed, albeit in a cutesy way, while complaining about their method of getting mithril, when they can just buy it. Unfortunately for her, the quality of the metal will not be as good as the rockworm, and Alexis then interferes to back up that statement, saying that the monster's stomach can turn its eaten silver into pure mithril, different from the stained ones in the market. Thanks to that, they can make high-quality weapons for their adventures. But it seems like the hero doesn't fancy using that pile of excrement because he already has his holy sword with him, which for Tia is so unfair. Nonetheless, the mission goes on with Ed informing them that they are on the right track, thanks to his exiled skill, Akashic Compass. Gonzo is impressed, but he thinks it's a waste that only Ed can use it, which, as you already know, is just the porter telling them that it's an item in the magic bag and not a cheat code ability. Oh, the tool's origin? A secret, as if it exists in the first place. After walking down the stairs, Ed informs them that they have finally reached the area, a blank wall where there's no way for them to progress anymore. Yet the rockworm's figure is nowhere in sight. While Tia wonders where in the world the monster is, Gonzo steps up and shows off his big muscles, prepared to dig the ground until they find the notorious worm. Ed says there's no need for that, however, and shows them how it's done by kicking the wall and activating the exile skill, Circular Reflector, to slam it with tremendous force. The three are bewildered by their porter's sudden actions, because they don't know that he's the main character, and Max gets what they want 81% of the time. Using the exile skill, Ed stores the impact from his kick's shockwaves and gathers them up endlessly, worrying Tia, who then asks the hero to stop him, only to learn that Alexis wants to wait and see the situation for the time being. After a few more strikes, Ed finally releases the pent-up impact and slams the wall with one powered-up attack, sending vibrations to the earth until an earthquake reaches the surface. All of these are according to plan, so everyone is not surprised, and they instead prepare themselves for the upcoming battle. Immediately, Gonzo orders the party members to hide behind him, because an enormous rockworm appears from below the ground to trample the intruders. The monk defends the whole team against the gigantic stomp and the merciless squeezes of the monster, before giving the go signal for the three to take their turn for the battle. While Tia recites a long chant, Ed and Alexis rush toward the worm's blind spot, though in reality, those creatures don't have eyes. And I've Googled that, yet the two manage to stab the gigantic monster with their blades, only come face to face with the fact that those stabs aren't effective against their absurd adversary. To make up for that, Tia finishes the chant and releases the spirit magic, Volcanic Lance, ordering it with a single go to fly toward the monster and incinerate him with burns that ultimately make a loud explosion. The rockworm's mouth is scorching with insufferable flame, making it a great opportunity for the hero party to strike, while preventing it from escaping through the roof until it becomes too late, and Ed needs to do the unthinkable. Without hesitation, he enters the rockworm's mouth, despite those sharp fangs, and Gonzo, as well as Alexis, can only stare at it, dumbfounded, while Tia, on the one hand, yells Ed's name in grave worry. Unfortunately, the monster slithers upward to escape from the grasp of the hero party, but inside him is an excited Ed, who is perfectly alive and driven with his plan to hinder this silver-eating creature from running away. He wounds his wrist with the sword, and ultimately creates a weapon using that gore and stuff to create a brand new, more powerful blade. On the surface, Tia looks clearly shocked and depressed due to what she saw from Ed. But fortunately, the movement of the rockworm suddenly halts, causing her to hurry and ask for Gonzo's assistance to save their porter until, out of the blue, a hole opens in the monster's guts. Finally, Ed gets out from the worm's stomach with a small ball in his hand, while complaining about the fishy smell of the creature's insides. His body is covered in red, so the censor is up to the editor's part, but you get the point. Just keep in mind that Alexis winks in happiness before reminding Ed that it's his own fault that he stinks because of that self-eaten performance. Still, Tia is worried sick, and he rushes to Ed, so close to hugging him as she then asks if he's okay. To Ed's surprise, however, Tia calls him dumb and shouts while questioning why he did something reckless that could possibly end his life. The porter tells the elf that he's just fine and has no grave injuries, but this man remembers that Tia has always been like this since their true first meetings, leading him to reassure Miss Elf by apologizing and explaining his wish not to let their efforts go to waste. Therefore, Tia sulks and pouts like a little child, allowing Ed to move the conversation to the main star of the show, the rockworm's poo, the chunk of pure mithril. Tia unexpectedly thinks it's still pretty, despite the you-know-what, while Gonzo feels that this tiny ball might be insufficient, given it's from a giant rockworm. However, the knowledgeable Alexis reveals that it's already too much, and it's the first time he has ever seen this large amount, which, for him, has an expensive value that will enable one to buy a whole castle. Imagine, a worm's doo-doo can make you a millionaire. Just don't ask Truck-kun to transfer you to another world. Anyway, Alexis needs to ensure that they will entrust this rare item to the best smith to make weapons out of it. although the opposite can be seen in the two who are still hung up on the mithril's price and have no luxury to think about such serious things. As a result, the hero asks Ed if he has a blacksmith in mind who will work with the item, but the porter suddenly drops a bomb, shocking Alexis as he hears a ridiculous statement from Ed, who just tells him that he's planning to forge the weapon himself. All-rounder bonsai. In a smithy somewhere in the town called the Silver Forge, the boss-like miner earlier welcomes the hero party in his shop, where Ed excitedly dashes from one place to another and asks the smith if he can really borrow all of them. The man replies with a smile and tells them that he should have lent it for free because they saved the town and all, but Alexis won't allow it. He hates to take advantage of the citizens like some hero somewhere. You decide who it is. Honestly, just rain it down in the comments. Afterward, Alexis warns Ed not to handle things half-heartedly, or else their efforts will be wasted. But the two then smile at each other after that serious exchange, hinting that the hero is trusting Ed. Thus, he urges Gonzo and Tia to head out so as not to disturb their porter. But the elf is so fixated on Ed and continues watching him with a pretty satisfied and curious face. When Alexis notices that, he comments about Tia's rare fondness and great interest in Ed, asking her why she, someone who's good at judging people, feels like that because she's a little quote-unquote too fond of him. Turns out the answer to that is something Tia doesn't know too, at least at this moment, and Alexis just smiles at Miss Elf upon hearing that. Phew, it looks like we won't have a love triangle this time. Let the ship sail. Afterward, the hero heads to a tavern with Gonzo, who suddenly tells Alexis that he doesn't have the right to say such things to Tia. Why, you ask? Because I am here. I mean, Gonzo thinks that Alexis is the one who's fondest of their porter, considering that he trusts a newcomer and goes to this forging town, even though this hero is usually skeptical when it comes to strangers. Alexis ponders it deeply and realizes it's because of Ed's strength, the mysterious artifact he possesses, and the valuable information that guy has. With that, this closet tsundere admits that he really is a little bit fond of Ed, but Gonzo bursts into laughter and advises Alexis not to feel shy about it. The story then returns to Ed, who reminds Tia that watching a blacksmith working should look so boring for her, only to hear from Miss Elf herself that she's watching Ed specifically, and not the labor he's doing. The porter panics and asks why, but his eyes open wide in shock upon seeing Tia's smile in the past blending with the current one, who thinks that Ed can do anything. However, the banished adventurer doesn't reply with a smile, and instead tells Tia that he can't do anything like she thinks because of what happened in the past, where precious beloved ones slip through his fingers time and time again, and he can't do anything about it. This time is different, however, as Ed is prepared to take this second lap by doing things differently, using his own two hands to change the tragic ending. Driven by those thoughts, Ed forges the equipment and ensures that he will make weapons worthy of changing his and the world's fate. Unbeknownst to them, a mysterious eye is watching their every movement, but it seems like he's against our Ed X Tia ship, because the object has no signs of romantic excitement while informing its master, Cayenne, about all events occurring involving the hero party. However, this new villain with familiar clothes feels displeased, thinking he's lucky to be assigned to reconnaissance this time, because the state of things is too much of a pain to handle. Thus, Cayenne decides to report the whole situation to the Demon Lord. This time, we open with a flashback of Ed carrying Tia on her back on the way to where the hero died. While running, he asks her what kind of person the porter they hired was like, and for a moment, Tia tries to remember the man. She recalled that he looked just like any normal guy, but he did have a pretty distinct nose. As for his name, it was redacted. And that's when Tia wakes up. Still feeling dazed, the elven lady kept having the same dream again about her and Ed living a different life and walking on a different path. In her mind, she wondered why she keeps having the same dream, even though she just met Ed. Speaking of Ed, our boy turns to her to ask if he woke her up, but Tia says she just dozed off on her own. This time, Ed suggests that she go to bed so she can rest properly. But in her mind, all Tia could think about was how Ed burst into tears as soon as he saw her face. Unknown to him, she considers their meeting a heartbreaking moment as well. But now all she can think about is that being here with him feels warm. Tia turns down Ed's suggestion, saying she wants to watch him a little more, even though he decides to continue with forging. Just then, he thought about having a little water break now that he was all sweaty. But suddenly, he was reminded of something and held himself back. Ed just remembered that he couldn't take all the treasures and travel footprints he had accumulated over the past 100 years. This is the very reason why he had to rebuild his sword in the first place. But at least the abilities and memories remain nonetheless. Just then, he conjured the Akashic compass, and saw that it pointed towards something on the west, making Ed pull a grim face. Just outside their workplace, Kyan and the snitch-looking eye observe our hero from afar, sizing him up as the human who is the cause of anomalies and disturbances within the hero's party. According to Kyan's intel, this human is supposed to be a porter, yet for some reason he's actually forging. His actions are just way too inconsistent. Meanwhile, the flying eye keeps on telling him that they should kill Ed, but Kyan decides that he'll keep an eye on him for a little bit longer. With that said, he got up somewhat complaining about how he can take on a human form. It's always the same face and body. It's like he has no control over it. But can you even consider that inability when you can't change your human form? With that said, he had to be extra careful because if his cover was blown, then it would pose a threat to their future activities. Upon hearing that, the floating eyeball teases him at his inability to change his looks, when suddenly Kyan turns to him more seriously and starts to change while saying he should show more respect, since his rank is higher than the eyeball. Soon, Kyan's body morphs into a shadow lizard, and he tells the other creature to wait for as he gathers more information on what to report to the Demon King. The next day, the sun was already high in the sky when Alexis and Gonzo came back to ask Ed if he'd finished forging the weapons out of mithril. The buff monk was pretty shocked at how he was able to finish all that, but in his defense, Ed was busy working on the weapons if he wasn't eating or sleeping. Alexis, on the other hand, only narrowed his eyes, asking our boy if that was enough to impress him. It's safe to say that Ed's pretty confident that he made the ultimate weapon. A pretty bold claim, but knowing what he's been through, I'd say that's true. His reply only made Gonzo all the more excited, but Ed had to stop him since they needed a place where he could show it off first. To do that, he showed off his Akashic compass, prompting Tia to ask what he was going to do with that. That's when Ed started to let them in on his plans. As the heroes' party convened, Kyan continued to spy on them from afar, trying to catch a glimpse of the new pieces of equipment Ed had made. From where he was standing, he could deduce a sword, a gauntlet, and a silver staff. Seeing all those from afar, Kyan couldn't help but be curious about these new weapons made out of mithril. In his mind, none of these pose a threat except for Alexis's holy sword. But somehow he's got this uneasy feeling in his gut. In the end, he decided to do further recon when suddenly, he saw Ed was already looking at him. We all know that look. This dude is about to get screwed. Big time. Kyan was taken aback and quickly hid behind one of the pillars in the building. He asked aloud if he was really spotted, or if it could have just been a coincidence. But rather than wait things out, he decides to shapeshift into his shadow bat and fly off to report this incident to the Demon King. He was already in a panic, thinking about how there was something off about the new guy. For starters, even the hero couldn't sense him, so how could this new party member? In addition to that, there's also the look in his eyes, as if he's looking at his prey. In his mind, Kyan denies this, as he tells himself that it's the other way around, and that it's just not possible. He was so wrapped up in his thoughts that he didn't sense the incoming ice blades that were fired from below, piercing through his wings. Kyan crashes back to the ground and is just starting to process that he has been hit with an ice arrow made of spirit magic. But that would be impossible, especially if it came from that distance. Suddenly, a pair of feet appeared in front of him, followed by a voice that called him General, and explained how he had always wanted to meet Kyan, but never expected to see him so soon. Ed squats right in front of a fallen Kyan, even calling out his name, much to the latter's surprise. How did this new guy know his name? But Ed already caught himself, asking if the shapeshifter's name was supposed to be a secret, and apologized for his slip-up. Not that any of that matters, because right now, Ed's got a delirious look in his eyes, as he tells Kyan that there's no point in keeping quiet. Kyan was about to deny all of this, when suddenly, Gonzo and Tia appeared, asking Ed how things went. As for our boy, he praised Tia for her perfect shot, impressed at how she was able to hit their target from that far away. While 3/4 of the hero's party were busy chatting away, a million thoughts were running through Kyan's mind. Just what is this guy, and how'd they manage to shoot him from that distance? But more important than that, does it mean that he's actually the one being watched this whole time instead of the other way around? Gonzo looks down on Kyan, confirming with Ed that the creature on the ground is indeed a demon scout, which our boy affirms, adding that doing recon is essential for the enemy after all. Tia also joins in, leaning down as she asks Ed what they plan to do next when Kyan suddenly shapeshifts into a human and tells them that he's actually an envoy of the Demon King, while still on his knees. Yeah, envoy our butt. Noticing that the hero Alexis is nowhere to be seen, Kyan tells them that he has a message for the former. He begins by saying that the Demon King has a proposal for a better future together, but Ed quickly cuts him off and says that the hero isn't coming. What's more, Ed says Alexis is giving them a chance to show off while the latter is busy evacuating the residents of the area. Now, hero business aside, our boy couldn't help but brush aside what Kyan was saying about the future, sarcastically saying how he finds it so funny that it brought tears to his eyes. With a determined look, Ed tells the latter how he intends to crush the future they dreamed of right here and now. His proclamation elicited a laugh from Kyan, who couldn't help but cackle up the idea that Ed is the one who intends to do it. Pretty big words for a lowly human, as he said. As he did so, Kyan started to transform, taking the chance to eliminate them, especially since the hero wasn't there to carry them all. Right before their very eyes, Kyan's voice not only grew, but his body as well, scoffing at how Ed looked down on him. Finally, his true form. A roach-looking creature reveals itself and towers over the three heroes. Tia and Gonzo are both on guard, while Ed looks annoyed at how Alexis chose the right job doing evacuation duty right now. Just then, Kyan attacks them with his claws, intending to crush them as a loud crash echoes in the area. Gonzo activated his aura shield while Tia and Ed managed to evade the attack. Kyan continues his rage monologue, expressing how much he hates Ed, especially since he made him reveal the former's violent appearance. This time, the creature readies himself to fire an attack, proclaiming that he won't stop until the town is reduced to dust. There was a flash of bright light as Kyan unleashed his attack, making Ed call out to Gonzo, asking if the old man would be all right, using the gauntlet like that. The latter assures that he is, activating his aura shield again, and before Kyan's attack could hit town, it was deflected thanks to the barrier Gonzo put up. The creature almost lost it, finding it impossible how Gonzo managed to produce a barrier big enough to cover the whole town. It is until said that a magnitude of this scale should be impossible, but three of our heroes stood unscathed, with Gonzo lowering his stance and showing off his new gauntlet. Alexa stands in one of the higher buildings, observing the fight from afar. He wonders if a new weapon can really make that much of a difference. This just makes him wonder who Ed really is. Earlier, he recalled how her boy handed Gonzo a pair of gauntlets, instructing the old man to concentrate his mana on his fists. Back to the present, Kyan lunged towards Gonzo with his claws, looking down on their lot for being mere humans. The latter was already in position, channeling all his mana into his fists, then proceeded to unleash it all at once. The result is Gonzo obliterating the whole of Kyan's right arm, leaving the villain speechless once again. On the other side, even Tia is amazed at how the creature's bodied part exploded, while Gonzo is feeling giddy and singing praises towards Ed for being the best. For the first time, Kyan realized that he was actually facing pretty strong opponents. Way too strong. And what's even more shocking is that they were already at this level even without the hero among them. Meanwhile, there's Gonzo, who fully believes that his muscles have finally reached the point of explosion and is about to execute another move. But all Kyan could wonder about is why all of this is happening. Was this all because of Ed? This piece of urgent information must be reported with great haste. So this time, Kyan decided to make a flashy exit that made Gonzo think he had blown himself up. But Ed knew better, aware that Kyan had just used the explosion as a distraction and burrowed underground. Our boy assumed Kyan had shapeshifted and ran away, which was true because now the latter is burrowing further underground as a rockworm, thinking that the hero's party can't chase him. Before he realized what was happening, a stone figure grabbed Kyan in his rockworm form, pulling him from underground and caging him in a tight embrace. This was Tia's technique, rockbind, which was amplified thanks to the mithril sword Ed forged for her. He explained that by infusing spirit magic into the sword's blade, Tia could give it a special attribute and unleash that element through his slash. Now back to the present, Gonzo's all fired up, surprised that Tia was capable of using such a powerful technique, but the latter clarifies that what she just did was a simple spell to trap enemies in stone. However, it has become quite powerful thanks to the sword that Ed made. Kyan, on the other hand, remains trapped in a rock figure's embrace as Ed slowly approached him, holding the staff lightly. Our boy has an unreadable expression on his face, telling the villain how he knows what the latter is about to do next, and continuing how his regret lingers on. Once more, he tells Cayenne that he won't forget even if he dies and gets reborn again, leaving the former confused. Ed tells him that it's okay if he doesn't understand, and simply says that it's his atonement, which further enrages the rockworm, asking our boy where someone like him even came from in the first place. With the memory of Tia's peaceful face, as she died flashing on Ed's head, he revealed to Cayenne that he came from that future. With that said, our boy finally unleashed his deadly technique, silver-winged sword, unfold in 12. Little slashes cuts through Cayenne's gigantic body, and it was over as soon as it began. The wings on Ed's staff molded back to their previous form, and with that, the finishing blow was done. Ed looked to the sky and down on his clutched fist, wondering if it was over when Alexis, Tia, and Gonzo came running, worried about him. Seeing them rush toward him made Ed smile and say to them that it was over, bragging about his new sword and swordsmanship, which made both Tia and Gonzo call him out for his smugness. The two approached the rockworm's body, with Tia wondering if it was really unhurt since it didn't look like it when Alexis told her to look closer. The main hero started to point out how the cut was nearly invisible, not to mention the fact that the surface of the cut was also frighteningly smooth. From the looks of it, Alexis assumed that Cayenne died without even realizing he was cut, before turning to Ed and saying that one cannot simply do something like this unless through a good swordsman with a good sword. Hearing Alexis say all that got Ed a little shy, trying to brush off the compliment as he said that what he did was just a makeshift solution. Just then, Alexis's voice turned more serious as he reminded her boy that he's the hero and that it's a title that's not only for show. As far as he knows, there's not a single craftsman capable of creating weapons comparable to the ones Ed just did. And yet, her boy only called it a makeshift solution. So what more could the real deal do? Finally, Alexis asked him the million-dollar question. Who was Ed really, and what was he hiding? Alexis is the hero of the story. He's chosen by the Holy Sword, and is deemed as humanity's only hope of defeating the... And as such, there are times when one's stature may lead to arrogance and cold-bloodedness. Right now, Alexis looks down on her boy with that piercing gaze, and if Ed was being honest, that look doesn't really suit the hero. This magnetic force of a man just asked her boy if he was hiding something, which made Ed falter a bit. Did he go a bit too far this time? So he tried to play it cool, obviously caught off guard by such a bold question. Alexis points to Ed's sword, saying how its appearance is deceptive and how it seems much more than a simple mithril staff. Even though he doesn't know the inner workings of the staff, Alexis believes that the tool could change its shape to form an insanely sharp blade. There was a moment of silence before our boy affirmed that it was exactly as Alexis had said. The mithril forms wings on one side, while the other side shapes into an incredibly sharp blade that reaches its sharpest when it has 12 wings. Ed says that's pretty much all there is to it because it extends even further. Then the blade would shatter at the slightest impact. In his mind, Ed didn't let Alexis know the truth of the matter, and it's that the blade doesn't transform with magic. Rather, it dies because of using the exiled skill Master Smith. With all that said, Ed praises the hero for his sharp eyes, impressed at how Alexis was able to figure it all out just by seeing it once. However, there's something else that the latter is contemplating, so he decides to rephrase his question to Ed. What heights does he aim to achieve as a blacksmith? Oh, so that's what he meant. Our boy was pretty sure he revealed himself, so his cover's still good, no? Ed decided to run with the idea that he just wanted to make a sword that could cut through. But Alexis cut him off, remarking how it was a typical goal when he knew very well that Ed could actually make a sword like that. This time, Tia chimed in asking what made the hero think that, and Alexis was quick to oblige. He pointed out how Ed said that his sword was a makeshift solution, and not a work in progress or an experiment. This meant that Ed could have made something even more amazed if he was under the right conditions. But at the same time, it begs the question, why was Ed in a hurry? He did say he was making the best sword in the world, or maybe there was something else, just like a lack of materials or equipment. At Alexis's question, our boy revealed that his biggest limitation was the material, not bothering to add that making a sword of that caliber under these circumstances is impossible. He also reasoned that he couldn't just buy more of the materials he needed, which is why he had to be careful. But the truth is that the things that needed came from other worlds. Alexis only hummed and settled for Ed's answer for now, as he told them that they needed to head back and clean up the mess they had made. Besides, they also have a city wall they need to fix ASAP, so it should be easy peasy if Alexis is the one to do the job. But before he could take a step further, Tia held him back and said that she and Gonzo would be the ones to handle the wall. Her eyes narrowed toward him, which made the hero question her actions. Rather than answer him, Tia and Gonzo made a run for it, leaving Ed alone with Alexis. Just as our boy was about to head out, Alexis suddenly patted him on the shoulder and said he had a special request for Ed. He wanted our boy to come to his room because there was something he needed to discuss with him. Now that was enough to make Ed panic and be portrayed as literally out of character. On the other hand, Tia busies herself fixing the town walls with one of her skills, the hand, which is literally a large pair of earthen hands that she used to carry a large boulder. Just then, the townsfolk spotted her, singing praise while Tia bowed her head in apology for making a hole in the town wall. They assured her that it was no problem while also fawning over Tia as they continued to express their gratitude. She was about to brush it off, claiming it was only natural to help when suddenly, the chorus of praises began to change and tell her how the demon lord doesn't stand a chance against them. Just like that, she feels the pressure of their responsibility again, but she can only smile and assure them that they will be the ones to bring peace to the world. Since you can't beat him, you might as well join him, which is exactly what Tia did, joining in on the town's support for them as they continued to place their expectations on their party. Gonzo joins in with a laugh, his voice booming over everyone else as he proclaims that a rabble like this isn't worthy of facing him in front of his mighty muscles. As if to prove a point, he even carries a boulder over his head as a display of strength, leaving the townsfolk in awe as the muscled monk continues that it will be the same once he meets the demon lord. Gonzo proceeded to drop the giant boulder off his shoulder, while the people gawked at how he was the most reliable when it came to the embodiment of muscles. He approaches Tia and pats her on the head, assuring the elven lady that everything will be okay. He also said that it's normal that people's expectations of them grow the more they accomplish, and this was part of the hero's burden. With that said, Gonzo urges her to let loose a bit, and that there is no need for her to act strong whenever she's with him. Besides, the monk adds that they've become a much stronger party since Ed joined. With a determined look on his face, he told Tia that they would defeat the demon lord. Hearing him say that comforted Tia, thanking her companion for what he had just done. But it just reminded him where the other two were right now. But before they could defeat the demon lord, our homeboy needs to defeat his own nerves first. Right now, he's on the edge of his seat, anxious about what Alexis could possibly want with him. The main hero gave him black tea, explaining that he had to make it the same as what they. Even if he wasn't sure, it was to Ed's taste. But Ed assures him it's all right, all while our boy kept thinking that being taken care of by Alexis like this feels like he's going to take care of him. If you know, you know. This is even more nerve-wracking for Ed because Alexis took the trouble of bringing him up to his room and treating him politely to boot. In the end, Ed just decided to ask what the other man wanted from him, assuming the worst, and thinking that he'd be exiled all over again when Alexis told him that he wanted our boy to take a look at this. The holy sword. Ed's a bit shocked that the hero is actually handing him his weapon, and even more so when the latter tells him that he doesn't mind if Ed draws it. Our boy does as Alexis says, all while thinking this was the very first time he got to hold the weapon, considering he has seen it a number of times in battle. It's not as if he could touch it freely since the hero hated it when someone else touched the weapon. Upon drawing the sword, Ed was about to ask something but cut himself off just as Alexis asked what he thought. For one, it's what Ed expected of the holy sword, an impressive blade. But Alexis cut him off to ask if the blade deserved to be called an incredible sword. Our boy fumbled for a bit since in his mind, he admitted that it was indeed a blade forged with top-notch techniques, and there was no way he could make something similar to this with his basic skills. Alexis then sighed because even Ed became aware that it was not the holy sword. Sure, it may be the ultimate weapon crafted by human hands, but it's still just an imitation. In his mind, Ed thought that if he went all out with his master smith, making a similar blade might just be possible. But in the end, it couldn't be considered the holy sword. Now he turns to Alexis, asking where the real holy sword is, and that's when the main hero looks away and replies that he doesn't know. They did everything in their power to try to find it, dispatching survey teams to all corners of the world to try to find it, but to no luck. Upon hearing that, Ed realized that the sword was just a substitute for the real thing until the real holy sword was found. Alexis said that if the demon lord were to discover that this was a fake, then they would exhaust all means to find the real one first. Once they do manage to find it, then humanity would lose its only chance at victory. Alexis adds that for so long, he's been deceiving everyone with the skills, but even he can sense that the sword is reaching its limit. Moreover, there's no one left who can forge a sword of this caliber. That is until Ed came along, because Alexis instantly knew that Ed could make an even more powerful sword than the one he had. Ed was silent, contemplating for a bit. If he used everything he learned from his first time in this world and all his exiled skills, he could probably have made a better sword than this. However, it would still be a fake and could never compare to the real one. He begins telling Alexis that he's flattered that the latter would put that much trust in him and is about to turn him down when suddenly Alexis bows his head to him. The arrogant Alexis actually lowered his head. This was enough to shock Ed, but the main hero continued that he'll give anything he wants, whatever materials or equipment he needs, just so Ed could forge him a sword so that he could continue being the hero. Ed tells him to stop, and that he shouldn't bow his head to someone like him, but Alexis replies that he will bow his head as many times as he needs, because as the hero, he bears the future of every single person on his shoulders. With that said, his failures become humanity's failures, so he must not falter. He must remain the beacon of hope. Seeing Alexis like this only made her boy ask why he was willing to go that far, pointing out how he wasn't given a choice to be a hero. It was forced upon him. To them, Alexis is nothing but a sacrifice meant to bear the burden and fight in their stead, which Ed knows Alexis is already aware of. So why was he still doing it? In reply, Alexis told him that it's because he's special. He can acquire anything he wants, and if he wishes for it, he can make anything happen, no matter how unreasonable it is. He believes that it is his purpose, to exist to give hope for peace in the future. With that said, he must make their hopes come true. So by Ed's hand, he asks her boy to allow him to keep being their hero. So it's like that, huh? Alexis is noble and proud, not because he knows he's special, but because he needs to prove himself worthy of it. He looks down on others because he knows his special needs, and in his mind, Ed admits that he misjudged him. That tells him that he understands, however, that his work is not worth a hero, and instead shows Alexis the Akashic compass, saying he'd like to find the true holy sword. Upon hearing what he said, Alexis raised his head a little to ask if the compass was not just a tool for locating magical beasts. And to that, our boy apologized for lying. In his defense, Alexis was already aware that Ed had a few secrets, after all. In his mind, if the Akashic compass's true functions were discovered, then it would make it much harder to get exiled later. However, if he doesn't respond to the hero's level of determination, then just what kind of man would that make him? As the Akashic compass points towards Ed's north, our boy offers his services to help find the holy sword, and the price for such services is defeating the demon lord and bringing peace to the world. Upon hearing that, Alexis finally smiled and commented on how Ed never ceased to amaze him. Alexis looked at him straight in the eye and said that he was willing to pay the price, as he asked Ed to lead him to where the holy sword was. Ed bows in return, calling him Hirosama, but the latter corrected him, telling him to call him Alexis. Moreover, the latter says that he has no intention of treating the person he has bowed his head to as a simple luggage carrier. Just like Gonzo and Tia, Alexis proclaims Ed as one of the hero's true party members, so he's allowed to call him by his name. This time, it was Ed's turn to get surprised as he smiled and called Alexis by his name before shaking hands, because finally, he became a true equal member of the hero's family. Just like that, the town wall was already fixed in just a day. The townsfolk stood in front of it, admiring the elven lady's work, even though it was just a simple renovation. They still found it amazing, and even more so since it's been repaired using spirit magic, so it looks stronger than before. Just then, the hero's party walks by, and they are quick to call out to Tia, saying she's welcome to stay much longer. But the latter tells them they need to leave since they know their next destination. At the very least, the townsfolk told her to at least accept their heartfelt gratitude for what they'd done to them, showcasing a statue that they erected in her honor. As if that wasn't tacky enough, they just had it built right next to her rock-bind figure hugging the rockworm. Tia could only stare at it blankly, while Gonzo and Ed did their best to suppress their laughter. One of the people even told her that he'd never forget the things she did, though he wasn't there when it happened. But hey, it's the thought that counts, right? As for Tia, she points out that Gonzo was there too, so why did they only erect her statue? Meanwhile, Alexis observes the statue and notes how it feels somewhat lacking, so he suggests they illuminate it with rainbow lights from below, making it even tackier, much to Tia's embarrassment. Then he turns to Ed, telling our boy to lead the way, and with that, the heroes' party sets out for their new goal, which is to search for the true holy sword. Now, the thing about the Akashic compass is that it only tells them the direction of their destination, not the distance, meaning this journey would not be a simple one. In the end, they can only trust where the compass points and head straight to where it's at. It doesn't matter if they have to go through towering mountains, deep forests, bogs, or any other treacherous landscapes. They followed the compass through a cave, but it was just a dead end, so they pressed further. As taxing as it was, Ed always wanted to go on an adventure like this, since it was nice seeing some of the scenery he missed the first time he was around here. All in all, it took them 3 whole months before they reached their destination. They arrived at a misty forest hidden between the mountains, beyond the northern reaches of a frontier country. The heroes' party had been walking around for a while when Gonzo spoke up and asked if they were heading in the right direction, because the monk was pretty sure they had passed by this area already. Ed assures him that they're on the right path, and asks Tia if she can locate where the mist is coming from, since it can't be blown away no matter what they do. The elven lady did so and revealed that the whole forest was under the influence of powerful illusionary magic. If they aren't careful when undoing the spell, then a new spell will take place. Moreover, she points out that there's something strange about the movement of mana since it seems to be reacting to something. Tia tells them that if what they're searching for is really there, then it could be so because Alexis is there with them. The 3 men exchanged looks while Alexis finally smiled because it looked like they finally made it to the right place this time. Gonzo shares his good food, though he warns the hero not to let his guard down considering what happened. To them last month, even Tia still wallows over whatever the heck happened to them in that cave. But all of Ed's focus was right in front of him as they approached a patterned open ground with stone golems, swords at hand, standing on each side. At the very center of the open ground is a pool of water, and right in the middle of it, the very weapon they were looking for is half buried in the ground. Ed was about to ask if that was the holy sword when the hero recited an adage. Deep in the hidden forest, at the innermost of a spring, rests the hero's strength. Now that he's here, Alexis realizes that the hero had to journey in person to find the holy sword, which explains why no one was able to find it until now. Tia and Gonzo offered their support to the comrade, patting him on the back as they urged him to pull it out, while Alexis turned to Ed to thank him. After all, they couldn't have made it here without him. Ed only smiled back and reminded him that they made a promise after all, urging Alexis to pull the sword out. But now that they're here, he wants Ed to try and pull it. Who knows what might happen? This just left our protagonist feeling a little puzzled. But that's when Alexis tells him that if only the true hero can draw the holy sword, then wouldn't that make Ed the true hero if he draws it? It's safe to say Ed didn't back down from that offer, so seeing there's no second chance after this, in turn hyped Gonzo and Tia to try pulling it too. Ed grabs the handle and tries pulling it with all his might, but the sword won't budge, not even a little. He even planned to stuff the whole platform into his stranger box, but that wouldn't count. So up next, Gonzo happily walked over to where the sword was. Like Ed, he tried to pull the sword with everything he had, refusing to let his muscles cave into something like this. But he too was a failure. So now it's finally Tia's turn, but even she wasn't able to pull it off, which was something Alexis had already somewhat expected. Finally, it was Alexis's turn to have a go and have his King Arthur moment. Alexis touched the tip of the handle, making the 3 restless from all the suspense. Gonzo's fairly surprised to see the hero get nervous like this, but they have confidence that if it's him, he can draw it. After that, Alexis tried to pull it out, and the three got all excited to see the sword move a bit as they started cheering him on to pull harder. All their cheering got him annoyed because wasn't this a historical moment for the hero? Suddenly he hears a voice asking who dared to lay his hand on the sword, and if he was a true hero. Before he realizes it, Alexis is transported back to the castle, right into the day he was born. He could see his mother holding him and naming him Alexis. She's cradled him as she smiles, saying that one day everyone will know his name because he's her precious child after all. In real time, Alexis stood motionless in front of the sword, making the three start to worry about him because he hasn't moved since he touched the sword. Ed starts walking toward him, asking if he's all right when he suddenly feels an incoming attack. Thank God for his quick reflexes, because Ed managed to evade a stone hand smashing where he stood. Ed jumped back to where Gonzo and Tia stood, just as the monk asked if they had walked into a trap because the golem started moving. Our boy tries calling out to Alexis to get a hold of himself, but Tia says it's useless because there's strong magic at work. In the looks of it, Alexis's consciousness had been whisked away somewhere, so these golems are here to make sure they don't interrupt the hero's trial. Back to Alexis, he watches his younger self ask his mother to read a book for him, making his mother giggle at his excitement. The younger Alexis excitedly tells his mother how he loves the story about the hero defeating the Demon King and saving the world. He even tells her that he'll be a hero like the legends one day too. The hero smiled at the memory, but just as quickly the scenery faded and changed into a memory of him standing right in front of his mother's casket. Ever since then, the young Alexis had worked hard and trained constantly to become the hero she saw in him, to be special like she said he was. But when he first met Gonzo, the latter made him realize that he wasn't special. Alexis tried taking down Gonzo, but the monk easily blocked his attacks, reminding the former that he was just a boy. Gonzo in real time is busy fighting the golems off along with Tia and Ed. Even with all these muscles, he had to admit that the golems had such toughness and power in them. Tia suggests they target the magic that's making the golems move, since physical attacks don't have any effects on them, pushing the responsibility to Ed so they can take care of Alexis. Ed quickly catches on and slashes the golem's shin while Tia strikes it in the chest. While all of this ruckus is going on, Alexis remains motionless in the middle, just as Gonzo shouts at him, asking how long he plans to space out. Back to Alexis's hero trial. This time he was shown the memory of the day his younger self finally be Gonzo. He thought about how he refused to give up on becoming a hero, even though the monk reminded him that he was just a boy. He's not really sure if it's delusion, nostalgia, or simply his stubborn desire to prove his point by pressing forward. But it didn't take long for him to reach his goal. Finally, the day came when Alexis was crowned the hero, signaling the final day that humanity would live under the threat of the Demon Lord. Alexis kneels to receive the hero title, but in his mind he wonders if this is what he really wishes for. Soon enough, he meets Tia, praising the talented mage for her power and asking her to join him, because to continue being a hero, he needed to gather companions. But the thing is, not everyone could keep up with him. Just then, Alexis is shown a different scene, the one wherein he tells Tia that she made a whole elaborate plan to get rid of the hindrance. It was the memory from his previous life. Tia tells him that if she doesn't do at least that much, then Ed would have followed her, and she can't protect him anymore. By now, Alexis grows more confused seeing this vision of him and Tia talking about Ed, and how she wants Ed to live and see the world in peace. By now, Alexis is frantic, asking why he was seeing something like that, something that never happened, and why he was being shown all these when the voice sounded again. It told him that it was not an illusion, but a potential future that occurred long ago, and that these memories existed. This time, it showed Alexis the final battle when they reached the demon realm, with Tia and Gonzo fighting for their lives. The voice told him that despite being loved by the people, the promises of a hero who never proved himself went unfulfilled, and in the end, nothing remained. Alexis clicked his tongue and tried to pull the sword, but he couldn't do so while the voice asked if a person like him really considered himself a hero. It went around asking him if he truly believed that he was worthy of being a hero, because a hero is someone who gives everything to save the world. Alexis, on the other hand, was too stubborn. The voice said it added that he would rather rot away in his own stubbornness than dedicate himself to his duty. All that lies ahead of him is the conclusion of the hero's charade and the end of the human world, just as his vision showed Alexis from before, handing Tia the teleportation crystal. On the outside, the three are still busy fighting off the golems, when finally the biggest one of them all stirs to life and approaches the motionless Alexis. The voice asks him again if he is truly a hero, and this time Alexis replies that he has no way of knowing if he is a hero just because he is called one. Maybe he thought he was special, just because others around him started calling him as such, so he went along for the ride, playing the part he was given. Ultimately, he admitted he wasn't a true hero, which made Ed call out to him direly. But Alexis adds that the one who gets to decide that there's a difference between those who are born great and those who work their butts to become great, that it's those around him who make him special. This much Ed helped him realize, so with that, Ed proclaims that he will surpass the voice's truth and create his own because he's a hero, pulling the sword out as he said so. As he did that, a flash of light beamed, followed by a powerful slash that cut the biggest stone golem in half with a force that pierced through the forest. Alexis stood holding the glowing holy sword, and Tia couldn't help but call it pretty with how it looked as if someone had sharpened the moon itself. Alexis stares at the blade in his hand, marveling at the power of the true holy sword. Clutching it tightly, he proclaims that he could break through the impregnable demon world and reach the demon lord, when he caught and corrected himself. With this power and all of them pushing him forward, Alexis truly believed that they could defeat the demon lord. Just like that, Alexis brilliantly took his place as the hero, with the moonlight subtly shining in his eyes as they talked about the technique he just used. The scene begins before the battle with the demon lord, where Gonzo approaches Alexis, offering to take over the night watch and urging Alexis to rest. Alexis asks about Tia and Ed, and Gonzo mentions they are already asleep, exhausted from the day. Alexis expresses gratitude to Gonzo for staying by his side all this time, hinting at concerns for the upcoming battle. Gonzo laughs off the suggestion, assuring Alexis that he's prepared and will protect him with his muscles. Alexis, however, asks for forgiveness in advance for any selfish decisions he may make in the future, to which Gonzo promises to support him. The scene then shifts to the heroes' party in battle, with Alexis, Gonzo, Ed, and Tia fighting against a swarm of demons. Gonzo uses his aura shield to protect the group, while Ed struggles to locate the prey. Alexis steps in, using his powerful full moonlight sword technique to annihilate the demons with a massive ball of light. Ed, using his Akasha compass, finds the real target and calls out to Tia. Together, they focus on the tallest tree in the area, where Tia shoots her Tempest Ray, a powerful bow made of light, striking the tree, destroying it. The forest was vast, filled with illusionary magic, and served as a dangerous boundary between the world of humans and the demons. Ed reflected on how difficult this terrain was, an impossible task for anyone but a hero like Alexis. Despite the harsh conditions, they pressed on, their journey far from over. After hours of navigating the treacherous landscape, the party decided to take a well-earned break. The air was thick with exhaustion, and as they set up camp, Tia sighed. "All we've been eating lately is preserved food," she muttered, her expression one of both frustration and longing. "I miss Ed's home-cooked meals." Ed, ever the optimist, laughed heartily. "When we get back to town, I'll make you the most delicious meal you've ever had." Gonzo joined in with his usual humor, adding, "Good food is all the motivation I need, but cooking out here would be a bit tricky." Tia, with a playful yet sad smile, said, "I'll be patient for now." Turning to Alexis, Ed asked, "Are you all right? That last attack looked intense. Aren't you tired?" Alexis, still catching his breath from earlier, shook his head. "I'm fine. I'm not great at controlling it yet, but I'll master it soon. After all, I am the hero." Ed smiled, unsurprised. "As expected of you." Tia, still reflecting on their journey, said, "I thought it would take us years to get this far, but it's only been 6 months since we met Ed, and yet it feels like we've been together for much longer." Gonzo nodded thoughtfully. "It's true. The time we've spent together has been short, but it's deep. A day together can be worth more than a decade apart." Ed remained silent, deep in his thoughts. 6 months had passed. 6 months, which meant his time with the party was nearing its end. One of the conditions to return to the white world was being part of a group for at least that long. As much as he enjoyed their company, his path would soon diverge from theirs. He had fulfilled his role, but the thought of leaving gnawed at him. Despite the camaraderie, despite the bond they shared, Ed knew his journey would always lead him elsewhere. As the group sat together, enjoying their brief moment of rest, Ed quietly asked, "What will everyone do after we defeat the Demon Lord?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment the group seemed surprised, except for Alexis. In his mind, Ed wondered, how do I naturally get them to exile me as he plotted his next move? Tia was the first to answer, breaking the silence. "Well, Alexis will become a king, right?" she said, hinting at the life that awaited Alexis after their victory over the Demon Lord. Ed, trying to lighten the mood, responded with a playful smile. "Is that so? Are you going to attach wings to the royal castle?" Tia and Gonzo burst out laughing, but Alexis, ever serious, simply replied, "There's no way that's possible." Shifting the conversation, Alexis turned to Gonzo and said, "Gonzo is going to return to the Eastern Kingdom for a while, right?" Gonzo nodded, confirming, "Of course, I can't just disappear without reporting. Don't worry, I'll be back soon." Alexis, with a deadpan expression, added, "I'm not really worried, though," causing Gonzo to laugh and teasingly say, "Don't be embarrassed." Turning to Tia, Gonzo asked, "What about you, Tia?" She smiled thoughtfully before answering, "I'd like to travel this peaceful world. It's still a big place, and there's so much to see and learn. Maybe even having a home somewhere where we could all gather and share memories of our travels. Sounds fun, right?" Gonzo and Alexis chuckled, with both commenting, "That's just like you, Tia." The lighthearted conversation eventually turned to Ed, and Tia asked, "What about you, Ed? What do you want in a peaceful world?" Ed hesitated before replying, "I'd like to go back to my hometown. It's a small village, but a nice place." Tia's eyes lit up. "Your hometown? That sounds interesting. I want to visit too." Caught off guard, Ed stammered, "If there's a chance, I suppose." Tia playfully scolded him. "Don't be stingy. You better tell me properly or else." Gonzo added with a grin, "That's right, kid. Even if the party disbands, we'll always be comrades. That bond won't break." With laughter and smiles, the group bonded even deeper. Alexis, noticing the intensity of the moment, looked over at the group and said, "What are you doing? Did you get drunk on water?" He raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "You're getting ahead of yourself, even though we haven't accomplished anything yet." Ed, however, wasn't laughing. His expression shifted to something serious. "Alexis," he said firmly, "make sure you defeat the Demon Lord no matter what. That's great, isn't it? Now you can make this happy future a reality, can't you?" Alexis straightened, his tone equally resolute. "Of course, I have no intention of breaking my promise to you." Ed let out a small smirk, almost like he was teasing. "Huh, did I say that?" Alexis, a bit confused, blinked. What now, of all times? But before he could dwell on it, Ed raised his fist, extending it towards Alexis with a focused intensity. "It's a promise, right? To defeat the Demon Lord no matter what you have to do." His voice was unwavering and his eyes locked onto Alexis's. For a moment, Alexis was caught off guard, but then, with a slow, determined nod, he lifted his own fist to meet Ed's. "Yeah, I promise. I will definitely defeat the Demon Lord." Later, as the camp settled into the quiet of the night, Gonzo took over the night watch, Ed sitting in front with a serious look crossing his face. "Gonzo-sama," Ed began, "can I ask you for something?" Gonzo, sensing the gravity of Ed's tone, gave him a nod. What Ed said next was left unrevealed, but whatever it was his final request before his inevitable exile. Morning came, and the party resumed their journey. After nearly a month of relentless travel, they finally arrived at the entrance to the demon world. Gonzo, with a mix of exhaustion and relief, shouted, "We made it! This is it!" Alexis stood at the front, his hand gripping his sword. "I'll open the path," he said, summoning all his strength. With a single sweeping strike, Alexis unleashed the full power of his moonlight sword, slashing open the barrier to the demon world. The ground trembled, and the dark, ominous landscape of the Demon Lord's domain came into view. The group's journey had led them here, to the heart of darkness. As they stepped forward, Ed's thoughts grew heavy. This was the place where, in a past timeline, the hero's party was wiped out. This is why they were defeated, Ed thought grimly, his eyes scanning the vast demon army that awaited them. Suddenly, a menacing figure emerged from the shadows, a powerful demon, its eyes gleaming with malice. It smiled cruelly. "I've been waiting for you, hero," the demon sneered. "Welcome, hero and his comrades. the scene shifts to the battlefield, where a demon greets the hero's party with a twisted grin. "I've been looking forward to this. Welcome, hero and his comrades. Only someone like you could make it through the demon world. But can you fight this army with your body so exhausted?" Alexis stands tall, unfazed, while Ed steps forward, sarcastically quipping, "What a grand reception. If you want the hero's signature, get in line." The demon's amusement fades as it realizes Ed is the black-haired baggage carrier who caused concern for the high-ranking leader, Sayan Sama. The demon's eye flares up, gleefully recognizing Ed. Ed raises an eyebrow. "No way I could have missed this," he mutters, while Gonzo, puzzled, asks, "Does a monster like this really exist?" Ed, still analyzing the situation, considers the possibilities. Is it the kind where info spreads when someone dies? He then turns to the demon and asks, "So if I stay, will you let the others go?" The demon laughs mockingly. "Talking nonsense, huh?" The lesson here is that no matter how weak someone seems, we have to eliminate them with absolute force. "I'll crush you all with the full might of the Demon Lord's army." Alexis steps forward, his expression growing serious. So basically, if we want to move forward, we have to go through you first, right?" He glares at the demon, his confidence unwavering. Was it really necessary to confirm that? Demons really do like to talk down with their air of superiority. "You're all talk." The demon, enraged by Alexis's taunt, roars, "I'll kill you!" and orders his army to attack. "Everyone, kill them all at once." As the demon army charges forward, Alexis mocks their arrogance, while Tia warns Alexis not to overexert himself, as they still have the Demon Lord to face. Gonzo, full of energy, leaps into the fight, smashing through the demons, while Tia casts a powerful spell that wipes out waves of enemies. The demon general, observing the scene, commands his army to sacrifice themselves to weaken the heroes, but their defense proves too strong. The demon general, determined to turn the tide, shouted, "Come forth, Jormungandr!" collapsed the ground beneath them. As the earth rumbled violently, a massive hole opened up beneath the heroes. "The ground's breaking!" Ed shouted as the team began to fall. "Damn, a trap!" Gonzo, startled, roared, "Are you planning to wipe out your own comrades too?" As the heroes plunged deeper into the collapsing earth, scrambling to find a way back up, they were soon confronted by a monstrous snake towering over the battlefield. "What the hell is this? A giant snake!" Ed exclaimed, wide-eyed. As the massive serpent emerged from the depths, Tia quickly cast her spell, summoning her earthly arm to surge through the hole. "Everyone, grab onto something!" she shouted, and as the giant arm propelled them forward, the snake chased closely behind. The arm managed to grab the serpent, but the snake sneered. "Nice try, but do you think you can escape me with that? I'll devour you all." Gonzo, unfazed, laughed. "I never thought something as big as you could fly. Impressive, but you're still far from a real threat." The snake scoffed, while Alexis quipped, "Wow, you can stretch and fly? That's handy." Ed, plunging his sword into the snake's head, muttered, No, this is tricky to control. We're going the wrong way." As they struggled to maintain control while riding the snake, Ed shouted, "We're going to crash," and urged Tia to use her wind magic to cushion their fall. Just as they slammed into the ground, smoke filled the air. Ed, coughing, asked, "Phew, did it work?" Tia responded, "It was close, but I managed. Good thing we made it in time." Ed handed her a mana potion, saying, "Great job, Tia. You must have used a lot of magic. Here, drink this. We still have a long way to go." Gonzo, laughing heartily, added, "Haha, the damage doesn't affect my muscles." Ed, grinning, replied, "Gonzo, maybe you should recover your magic too." Alexis surveys the surroundings, noting they've finally arrived at the true demon world. Though their path differs from the plan, Tia voices her concern about leaving the demon army behind, warning that they could be attacked from both sides. Alexis, his expression serious, agrees and addresses the group. He thanks them for standing by his side and expresses his gratitude for their loyalty, but he also offers them a choice. Unlike him, they have the right to live their own lives, and if they choose to retreat, he promises not to blame them. Tia immediately responds, her voice filled with determination. "Why are you asking this now? Of course we're going together." Gonzo, ever full of spirit, exclaims that his muscles will keep moving forward, no matter what. Ed, reflecting on Alexis's resolve, acknowledges the hero's pride and determination, understanding why Alexis asked them to make this choice. However, Ed makes his own decision. With a grin, he announces, "Ha ha ha, great, that's a relief. But I won't be staying, Alexis." His declaration catches everyone off guard, especially Alexis, as the realization of Ed's intent to leave sinks in. "Ed, what are you suddenly talking about?" Tia asked. her voice filled with worry. "It's unusual for you to joke at a time like this," but Ed's expression was dead serious. "This isn't a joke," he replied in a calm, grave tone. Tia's heart sank, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Why?" she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Tia," Ed said softly, though his words were filled with certainty. "For me, this is the end." Tia's breath caught in her throat. "But we promised we'd be together forever," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ed sighed, glancing down as his thoughts raced. He had been thinking about this for a long time, about how, if he stayed until the Demon Lord was defeated, he might never be able to return to his world. Once the hero's mission was complete, the hero might cease to be a hero. If that happened, the condition of his exile could no longer be fulfilled, trapping him here. The risk was too great. "I can't take that chance," he thought, his frustration growing. That's why he needed to leave now, before the battle ended, before it was too late. Sensing the gravity of Ed's decision, Alexis stepped forward, his calm demeanor hiding the weight of the moment. "I see," he said quietly. "Your ability to stay rational in situations like this is what brought you this far, hasn't it?" Tia, confused, questioned Alexis, but he continued. "To me, as a hero, these are simply weak monsters. Even though they're weak individually, their numbers are significant. But even the impossible is possible for someone like you, an ordinary person." Tia, still puzzled, asked again, "What do you mean if it's Ed?" Alexis interrupted gently. "Tia, that was Ed's decision." Turning to Ed, Alexis continued, "You wanted to return to your hometown that day, didn't you? In that case, this is a rational decision." Ed remained silent, processing the words, and Alexis urged everyone, "Let's respect his decision." Ed, quietly thankful, responded, "Thank you, Alexis. This is where we part ways." Alexis then reassured Ed with a determined tone, "Don't worry, Ed. Thanks to you, I have the Holy Sword. I can handle this effortlessly." With that, Alexis told Ed in a serious tone to activate his teleportation spell. Still reeling from the shock, Tia turned to Gonzo. "Are you really okay with this?" she asked, searching for support. I understand how Ed feels, but for the first time, Gonzo seemed lost. His face was pale, sweat dripping down his brow. "Kid, don't tell me," he muttered, recalling a conversation he had with Ed during one of their night watches. Ed had asked him, "Can I ask you for something?" Gonzo had been taken aback at the time. "What's this? Now you're being formal? Are you feeling unsure?" But Ed had reassured him with a calm expression. "No, it's not that. Actually, I feel at peace. Alexis now holds the true Holy Sword, and he's the strongest hero without a doubt. Tia's grown strong enough to defeat any enemy, and you, Gonzo, can protect everyone. Together, we make up the strongest bow and shield. We're so strong, I almost pity the Demon Lord." Gonzo had responded with warmth. "It's true. Having someone like you makes us even stronger. But don't be modest. It's the combination of all four of us that makes this party special. We wouldn't have made it this far without you. So, what do you need from me?" Ed had smiled then. "All right, I won't hold back. After we cross into the demon world, I think we'll be ambushed by the Demon Lord's army." Gonzo had replied. "With all this chaos, it wouldn't be surprising." "Right," Ed had said, his tone turning more serious. "But the problem isn't just that. The real issue will be the number of enemies. If it's just a small reconnaissance troop, we could handle them easily. But what if it's a large army?" In his head, Ed already knew the answer. The enemy would almost certainly deploy their full military force against them. Gonzo, trying to remain optimistic, had said, "Well, it could still be a good opportunity to weaken their numbers before the final battle." But Ed had shaken his head. "Normally, yes. But since the day we entered the demon world, we've been fighting without rest. No sleep, no break. These battles will continue until we escape or fall. Even if we keep winning, fatigue is building up. Do you think we can defeat the Demon Lord in this state?" Gonzo had fallen silent, realizing the truth in Ed's words. "Gonzo-sama, the most important thing is getting Alexis to the Demon Lord." "I agree," Gonzo had nodded. "My muscles are made for exactly that." Ed's voice had turned grave. "We need to be prepared to make rational decisions when the time comes. When that moment arrives, Gonzo, I need you to watch my back as you watch theirs." Back in the present, Gonzo, filled with emotion, could barely manage to speak. "Please, no, I'm begging you, Ed." But Ed, ever calm, handed Gonzo a large pack. "Everything's in here. It's heavy, but an old man like you can carry it easily, right?" With a final nod of understanding, Gonzo accepted the pack. "Got it, Ed. The time has come, hasn't it?" "Yes, I'm begging you," Ed replied. The two shared a glance of pure resolve. Gonzo, his voice steady, said, Understood. He then turned to Alexis and Tia, saying, "All right, you two, let's get moving." But Tia and Alexis, confused, noticed something was wrong. "Gonzo," Tia said, "you're heading the wrong way. The Demon Lord's army is on the opposite side." Alexis, suddenly realizing what was happening, turned in time to see Ed leaping towards the Demon Lord's forces. "Ed!" he shouted, trying to rush after him, but Gonzo was ready. He grabbed Alexis's arm, holding him back with surprising strength. Alexis struggled, fury and confusion in his voice. "Let me go, Gonzo. Don't underestimate me. I'm not someone who would use a comrade as a sacrifice to advance." Meanwhile, Tia, realization dawning on her, stared wide-eyed at Ed. Gonzo, quick to act, cast a barrier spell around Alexis and Tia, stopping them from pursuing Ed. "What's going on?" Tia asked, her voice shaking with disbelief. "Why did you cast a barrier now?" Alexis shouted at Gonzo. "Do you really think I'll accept this?" Ed, watching from afar, thought to himself, "Of course you won't accept it. That's why you helped Tia through the first lap, Alexis. You're the hero who always puts others before himself." He smirked, turning towards the Demon Lord's army. "Hey, don't get me wrong," Ed said aloud. "The Demon General did say he'd use the full power of the Demon Lord's army to end us. So, if I eliminate all of them, the only one left will be the Demon Lord, right?" Gonzo looked at Alexis, his expression stern but understanding. "Alexis, if you truly are the hero, then you should understand the kid's determination. Everyone believes you will defeat the Demon Lord, so what will you do?" Alexis didn't respond immediately, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His mind raced, thoughts swirling. "I believe I could do it." It seemed like the right time, but as he bit his lip, blood trickled down and doubts crept in. Will it be enough? Can we truly defeat the Demon Lord and bring peace to this world? He looked at Ed, and memories flooded back. The promise they made to defeat the Demon Lord together. Then Ed raised his fist toward Alexis, resolute. "No matter what you have to do, this is our last promise." The weight of that promise hit Alexis hard. Ed's decision had been made. "Could you please expel me from the hero's party?" "For desertion?" Ed asked solemnly. Tia's heart shattered at that moment, tears welling in her eyes. "No, I won't accept this," she cried, her voice trembling with anguish. The thought of Ed leaving tore through her, and she fought against Gonzo's grip. "Please stop. Let me go," she yelled desperately. But Gonzo, his own heart heavy, held her firm. "What? Let me go, Gonzo." "No," she begged, but he didn't relent. Alexis, standing silent for a moment, finally spoke, his voice steady but filled with sorrow. "All right, Ed, you are expelled from the hero's party." He threw the old holy sword toward Ed, further commenting, "But be sure to come back and return, comrade." In Ed's mind, gratitude swelled. "Thank you, Alexis," he thought. Suddenly, a notification appeared in his vision. Condition met. Ed's thoughts turned to Gonzo. "I leave everything in your hands, old Gonzo." Another notification followed. 10 minutes remaining until return. His mind drifted to Tia, and he thought, "Tia, I'm sorry. The only reason I started this second life was to see your smile again. But in the end, I made you cry once more." In the background, Tia's sobs filled the air as she murmured, "Ed will die. At least Her thoughts swirled in confusion and pain, as the reality of sacrificing someone important once again hit her hard. "I hate this! I don't want it!" she screamed, emotions spiraling out of control. Gonzo, losing patience, finally roared, "Enough! Are you thinking of wasting Ed's determination?" His voice echoed powerfully, cutting through her turmoil. Shocked, Tia whispered, "Even Gonzo?" "I know, but..." Gonzo interrupted her, his voice steady but emotional. "I was the one chosen. Only Ed believed in me and asked me to do this." With tears brimming in his eyes, Gonzo urged, "If you don't respond to this, you can't call yourself a comrade." Both Tia and Alexis fell silent, accepting the truth as they prepared to face the Demon Lord. Meanwhile, Ed confronted the Demon Lord's army alone, confidently saying, "Sorry to keep you waiting. Thanks to you, the hero can move forward without any obstacles." The Demon General sneered, "It's a futile fight. I'll crush you and catch up to them soon." Unfazed, Ed smirked, drawing his holy sword and the 12-winged one and activating his skill, the contract to end the blood mist, enveloping himself in a bloody mist as he declared, "This is the end of the line for all of you." The scene shifts to Tia's thoughts as she recalls memories of Ed. She reflects on how Ed would often wear a distant expression, especially when they first met, or when he was making their weapons. It was as though he was looking outside a window, observing a world he didn't belong to. She recognizes that his face seemed to say, "I don't fit in here." This unsettled her, and she always wanted to show him that he did belong, even if it meant risking her life to prove it. But now she questions herself, wondering if Ed's desires were far beyond anything she could imagine. Suddenly, a massive demon leaps in front of the hero's party, shouting, "This is as far as you go, hero. I didn't expect to actually have the chance to tear you apart. But here I am. I, Grazgiar, guard this path. Don't think for a second you'll pass me." Tia's thoughts continue, thinking that if Ed's place was beyond her understanding, she could never turn her back on his wishes or stop him from pursuing what he truly wanted. Alexis steps forward, boldly addressing the demon. "As we are now, you are no match for us." Meanwhile, Tia speaks up, asking Gonzo to put her down. "I'm okay now," she says. Surprised, Gonzo responds, "Huh?" But Tia reassures him, "I'm really okay." Alexis notices Tia stepping down, preparing to act. Grazgiar, the demon, sneers, mocking them. "Sacrificing one of your weaklings? That's a plan fitting for a spineless hero like you." Tia, undeterred, begins to recite her spell. Her silver spirit sword manifests, and with tears in her eyes, she summons a massive tornado that instantly obliterates the demon in a single attack. Tia thinks to herself, "I have to keep moving forward." Out loud, she declares to Alexis, "Let's go, Alexis. We're going to defeat the demon lord." In her heart, she adds, "To reach the future Ed longed for, from beyond that window." The scene then shifts to Ed, who is in his mist form, fiercely battling the demon lord's army. The demons panic as the barrier is breached, shouting for reinforcements. One of the demon generals observes Ed's power and disbelief, questioning, "Who is this man? He's not even the hero, but he's destroying us. How is a mere porter this strong?" As Ed continues fighting, he uses his skill, Blood Engine, which amplifies his abilities by 100-fold. However, the immense energy it releases causes his blood to boil, turning into steam. He knows the cost of this power. After 10 minutes, his heart will burst, killing him. But for now, he fights on. A demon, realizing Ed's overwhelming speed, attempts to slow him down by using the spell, Gravity Erase, which causes Ed to float. "What a pain," Ed mutters, as he realizes the magic affects the environment rather than him directly. Another demon takes this chance to attack, manifesting a massive energy ball and unleashing it toward Ed. "Destruction Nova!" the demon shouts. The blast hits Ed, and the demon laughs, assuming victory. "Finally dead, huh? It sure took some time to deal with you, weakling, but this farce is over." The demon general, witnessing this, orders Gigamoth to chase after the hero's party. But the demon named Gigamoth, who launched the attack, mocks the general. "Hold them off. You've lost your authority now that your army has fallen. I'll defeat the hero myself." Before the general can respond, Ed, still very much alive, speeds toward the demon who attacked him, striking him in the head with his sword. "I already told you, you're not going anywhere," Ed yells, slashing the demon apart. The demon general, enraged, shouts, "Why aren't you dead yet? Just die already." He uses his ability, Gravity Press, to crush Ed with immense force, but Ed easily breaks through the attack with his skill, Magic Absorb. "That won't work on me," Ed says coldly, before countering with his blood blade, Tempering. He reflects on his journey, thinking, "I've repeated the same thing for the past 100 years. No matter who I'm with or what I do, in the end, I'm just an outsider." Ed continues to slaughter the demons, using another technique, Orbital Reflector. He thinks to himself, "This is who I am. Liberation defines how I live and shapes the future I desire." As Ed punched through a high-ranking demon, destroying it with a single blow, the demon general's panic became palpable. "Stop him. I don't care who does it. I misjudged him. This man is our greatest threat," he shouted in desperation. Suddenly, another massive demon lunged forward, chopping off both his arms. Bleeding heavily, Ed remains unfazed. "Since I return alone, I'm going to bring everything back with me," he thinks. He then uses his own blood to form new blades, slicing through the demon with overwhelming force. Ed, standing among the corpses of countless demons, blood raining down on him, reflects on the tragic ends he's witnessed and the despair he has fought to overcome. Then, a notification pops up, saying, 1 minute remaining until return. The scene shifts, showing the Demon Lord's army completely annihilated. Ed, severely injured and bleeding, walks towards the last standing demon general. The general, overwhelmed by Ed's strength, wonders aloud, "How can one man have so much power? I don't understand, what are you?" Ed, still silent and looking down, activates his regeneration ability, non-licensed doctor without bandages, and regenerates his arms. He flips his hair back, looking cool despite his bloodied body, and lets out a breath. "Time to finish this," he mutters. The remaining demon soldiers, sensing weakness, rush at him, but they are easily dispatched by Ed. He uses his ability, Stranger's Box, to summon the old holy sword, eliminating the last of the demon soldiers in one swift motion. Turning his attention back to the general, Ed says calmly, "Now then, General, you're the last one standing. What will it be?" The demon general acknowledges Ed's strength, admitting that he is likely the strongest member of the hero's party, which is why he stayed behind. But he warns Ed that his arrogance will lead to his downfall, vowing to take him down, even at the cost of his own life. The general conjures a massive energy ball and shouts, "Gravity collapse!" Ed responds with a smirk, "You think I'm the strongest? Don't make me laugh." He reflects on his comrades, Old Man Gonzo, whose body, heart, and muscles are stronger than anyone's, Alexis, whose courage is unmatched, and Tia, whose warm smile uplifts everyone. They're the best, Ed thinks, and together they're the strongest in the world. Still unfazed by the general's attack, Ed lunges forward, thinking to himself that they're different from an outsider like him, and strikes the general through the chest. "That's why I'm able to stake everything on this moment," he says aloud. "Even if I'm gone, I know they will win." The demon general, fatally wounded, laughs bitterly. "I've lost, but I've achieved my goal. You too will burn out here. You'll never reunite with your comrades. Die alone in solitude, you strongest loser." The general mocks as he dies. Ed, unfazed, finishes him off with a single final slash and stores the holy sword back into his stranger's box. Breathing heavily, Ed comments to himself, "Even after boosting my recovery, this is still tough. But the enemy is gone. I made it in time." Still catching his breath, Ed jokes lightly, "Didn't even sweat, though his body is weakening. There shouldn't be any enemies left to stop them. The rest is up to you, Alexis," he thinks, feeling his heart weakening from the strain of his abilities. He muses about the future his comrades will have, imagining Alexis and Gonzo's bright futures, and Tia no longer needing to hide away. Suddenly, Ed glances around and realizes the place he's in is familiar. Is this fate? He recalls memories of his first lap, where he and Tia visited the place where Alexis and Gonzo had fallen and where Tia herself had passed away. "I see. So this is my final destination." Ed wonders aloud, "Tia, did I fulfill our promise? Did I carry your wish with me all this way?" Not receiving an answer, he says to himself, "That's the best reward." Ed decides to leave something behind. Opening his stranger's box, he throws the 12-winged sword down, thinking it would be bleak if no one found a trace of him. He hopes that once Tia and the others see the sword, they'll understand he died there. "That should do it," he says, as the countdown for his return continues. 5, 4, 3. At the final second, Ed smiles and thinks, "Good luck, Alexis. I'm counting on you. Gonzo and Tia take care." The countdown hits 0, and Ed is transported back to the white world. Upon his arrival, Ed lets out a sigh. "Phew, looks like I made it back in one piece." He comments on how dull the white world is, but quickly checks his body. His usual shabby armor, his sword, and his body all seem normal. "Everything checks out," he says, glad nothing changed during his transfer. He remarks that if anything had been different, he might have died from the after effects of his exile's skill. Ed approaches the door labeled 001, reflecting that Alexis and the others will probably defeat the Demon Lord in no time. "It's a shame I can't get my manju buns now. I'll have to wait until after the 100th world," he jokes. He notices the white orb, and he touches it, expecting a new skill or an upgrade, but instead, a book drops on his head. Frustrated, Ed shouts at the god who seems to be playing tricks on him. "Cut that crap out! Why does it always have to drop on my head?" Picking up the book, he notices it isn't white like everything else. It's titled The Heroic Record Results Book, which details Alexis's life from birth, narrated from the perspective of a deity. Ed flips through the book, finding detailed accounts of Alexis's entire life, including his childhood and even his thoughts. As Ed reads, he laughs at some of the memories. He's touched when the book describes Alexis acknowledging Ed's contributions to the party, calling him the true hero who made everything possible. "You exaggerate too much," Ed says with a smile, placing the book on a newly appeared bookshelf. Ed realizes the bookshelf is still mostly empty, and reflects that, while it's dedicated to Alexis, it doesn't tell him much about the fates of Gonzo or Tia after the Demon Lord's defeat. Old Man Gonzo probably went back to his homeland, Ed thinks, but I'm a bit worried about Tia. Is she traveling the world like she said? Or maybe she's looking for me. Ed then approaches the second door, labeled 002, and with determination he thinks, they kept their promises. Now it's my turn. I'll create a happy ending for the remaining 99 worlds too. Suddenly, Ed recalls the Demon General's words, "Die alone in solitude." With a sad smile, Ed wonders why those words are sticking with him. "This is the future I chose," he tells himself. "I would leave nothing behind and belong nowhere." Just as Ed prepares to leave, a glistening light appears behind him. He turns around, and to his shock, he sees Tia, tears streaming from her eyes. "I've finally found you." And that's the end of the manga recap for now. I covered chapters 1 to 17, and the title of the manga is Sui Husareru Tabi ni Skill Oteni Ireta Orega, 100 no Isekai de Tu Shume Musu. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more manga recap videos. Thank you for watching.